Chapter 1. The words hit Riley like silver bullets to the chest. You're not mate material, Riley. You never will be. Jackson Crossfield's voice carried across the sacred clearing where the entire Moonridge pack had gathered for the quarterly mating ceremony. Every wolf, from the youngest pup to the eldest elder, heard Beta Jackson reject Riley Ashwood for the 7th time. The 7th. As if the first 6 hadn't been humiliating enough. Riley's hands trembled at her sides. The white ceremonial dress her mother had sewn with such hope now felt like a burial shroud. Around her, 200 pairs of eyes burned into her skin. Some held pity. Others held mockery. All of them witnessed her shame. Jackson, please. The words slipped out before she could stop them, weak and desperate. Exactly what she'd promised herself she wouldn't be. Not this time. Not again. But there she stood, 23 years old and begging like a lovesick teenager. Jackson's dark eyes held no warmth, no recognition of the girl who used to follow him through the woods, who'd shared her lunch with him when they were children, who'd dreamed of being his mate since she was old enough to understand what mates were. Look at yourself, Riley. His voice was clinical, detached. You can barely shift without exhausting yourself. Your wolf is so weak she can't even maintain form for more than an hour. What alpha would want a mate who can't even protect herself, let alone bear strong pups? The crowd murmured agreement. Riley heard her cousin Sarah's voice among them. She should know better by now. Heat flooded Riley's cheeks. Her wolf, Vera, whimpered deep in her mind, a broken sound that made Riley's heart crack a little more. It was true. Her wolf was small, silver-white instead of the powerful grays and browns of her packmates. Where others could shift in seconds, Riley needed minutes. Where others could hunt for days, Riley tired after hours. She was defective. Everyone knew it. Everyone had always known it. I could try harder, she whispered, hating herself for the words even as they left her lips. I could train more, get stronger. No. Jackson stepped back as if she carried some contagious disease. I've indulged this fantasy long enough. I won't be tied to weakness. Not when I'm being considered for alpha succession. Alpha succession. Of course. Riley should have seen it coming. Jackson had been beta under Alpha Ethan for 3 years now, and with Ethan getting older, everyone knew the transition was coming. An alpha needed a strong mate. A Riley who could stand beside him, not behind him. Not someone like her. Find someone else, Riley. Someone more, suited to your station. Station. The word hung in the air like a slap. Riley came from a respected family. Her father had been a warrior, her mother a skilled healer. But that didn't matter when your wolf was broken. The blood moon hung full and red above them, casting everything in crimson shadows. Riley had thought it was a good omen when she dressed tonight. Blood moons were supposed to strengthen the mate bond, make connections clearer. Instead, it illuminated her humiliation for everyone to see. I understand, Riley said, her voice steadier than she felt. She lifted her chin, meeting Jackson's gaze directly. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, that she wasn't crying or pleading anymore. Good. He nodded once, already turning away. Ethan wants to begin the ceremony. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Don't make this harder. As if she was the one causing problems. As if her feelings were an inconvenience to be managed. Riley watched as Jackson walked back to the center of the clearing where Alpha Ethan waited. The older man's gray beard was neatly braided for the ceremony, his massive frame commanding even at 60. He caught Riley's eye and gave her a look that might have been sympathetic. Or pitying. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. The ceremony will continue, Ethan announced, his voice carrying easily across the gathering. All unmated wolves, please step forward. The crowd shifted. Dozens of young wolves moved into the sacred circle, their faces bright with hope and anticipation. Riley had stood in that circle every quarter for the past 5 years, ever since she'd come of age. She'd felt that same hope, that same desperate yearning. Not anymore. She turned away from the ceremony and walked toward the edge of the clearing. No one stopped her. A few people glanced her way, but most were already focused on the pairing ritual beginning behind her. Riley heard the first howl, a young male calling for his mate, and her chest tightened. The forest beckoned beyond the torchlight, dark and welcoming. Riley had always felt more comfortable among the trees than among her own people. Trees didn't judge. They didn't whisper about her failures or measure her worth by her wolf strength. "Riley, honey, wait." She paused at her mother's voice. Madeline Ashwood hurried over, her healer's robes rustling around her ankles. Even at 50, she was beautiful, the kind of classical beauty that aged gracefully. Riley had inherited her silver blonde hair and small frame, but none of her mother's innate grace. "Mom, please don't." Riley couldn't handle sympathy right now. It would crack what little composure she had left. "He's a fool," Madeline said fiercely, taking Riley's hands. "Jackson Crossfield is a blind, arrogant fool, and someday he'll realize what he lost." "No, he won't." Riley squeezed her mother's hands once, then gently pulled away. "He's right, Mom. Look at me. Really look at me." Madeline's eyes filled with tears. "I see my beautiful daughter. I see someone kind and loyal and weak." Riley finished. "You see someone weak. Everyone does." Before her mother could argue, Riley stepped backward into the tree line. The ceremony continued behind her, full of joy and new beginnings that would never include her. She could hear the pack singing, their voices rising in the ancient mating songs passed down through generations. She walked deeper into the forest, letting the darkness swallow her. Her feet found the familiar path that led to her favorite spot, a small clearing by the creek where she used to practice shifting when she thought no one was watching. Where she'd practiced the speech she'd planned to give Jackson tonight, back when she'd been foolish enough to think the 7th time might be different. The blood moon filtered through the canopy above, painting everything in shades of red and black. Riley reached the clearing and finally let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. 7 rejections. 7 times she'd put herself out there, vulnerable and hopeful, only to be shot down in front of everyone. Her wolf, Vera, stirred restlessly in her mind. Even weakened, even broken, Vera was proud. She didn't understand why her human kept subjecting them both to this humiliation. "I'm sorry," Riley whispered to her wolf. "I'm so sorry, Vera." The apology seemed hollow. How many times had she made it now? How many times had she promised things would get better, that someone would see their worth? Riley sank to her knees beside the creek, her ceremonial dress pooling around her in the fallen leaves. The white fabric would be stained now, ruined. Somehow that felt fitting. "I vow," she said aloud, her voice carrying across the empty clearing. The blood moon seemed to pulse brighter, as if listening. "I vow I will never beg for love again. I will never put myself through this again. I am done being weak. I am done being everyone's pity case." The words felt like binding magic, settling into her bones with surprising weight. Riley had never made a vow under a blood moon before. Her grandmother used to say they carried special power, that the moon goddess herself listened on nights like this. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she continued, tears finally starting to fall. "But I won't do this anymore. I won't be this person anymore." A branch snapped somewhere behind her. Riley spun around, her heart hammering. The forest had gone silent, no insects, no night birds, nothing. Even the wind had stilled. Her weak senses strained, trying to penetrate the darkness beyond the clearing. "Hello?" she called softly. Nothing answered, but the feeling of being watched pressed against her skin like a physical touch. Someone was out there. Someone had heard her vow, witnessed her breakdown. Great. Even her private moments weren't private. Riley stood slowly, brushing dirt and leaves from her dress. "I know you're there," she said, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "You might as well come out." Still nothing. But those eyes, she could feel them tracking her every movement. Not threatening, exactly, but intense. Focused. Like she was the most interesting thing in the forest. When had anyone ever looked at her like that? "Fine," Riley said. "Keep hiding. I'm going home." She turned to leave, then hesitated. Something about those watching eyes felt familiar, though she couldn't place why. They reminded her of something, a dream, maybe, or a half-remembered story. Golden eyes watching from shadows. Riley shook her head. She was letting her imagination run wild, probably because of everything that had happened tonight. There was no one there. Just her own paranoia and wounded pride making her think otherwise. She started back toward the pack lands, but something made her look over her shoulder one last time. For just a moment, she could have sworn she saw a flash of gold between the trees, bright and intelligent and utterly inhuman. Then it was gone, leaving only darkness and the lingering scent of something wild and powerful that made her wolf stir with sudden, inexplicable interest. Riley hurried home, her vow echoing in her mind like a promise. Or maybe a warning. Behind her, the forest kept its secrets, but the golden eyes followed her until she was safely back among the pack lands. Only then did they disappear completely, leaving no trace they had ever been there at all. The blood moon watched over everything, ancient and knowing, as if it had seen this story play out before and knew exactly how it would end. Chapter 2. Riley's stomach cramped with hunger as she stumbled through the dense undergrowth. 3 days. She'd been walking for 3 days with nothing but the clothes on her back and what little money she'd managed to grab before fleeing Moonridge territory in the middle of the night. Her ceremonial dress was long gone, traded to a sympathetic human woman at a gas station for jeans, a t-shirt, and a granola bar that had lasted all of 6 hours. Now she wore the clothes like armor against a world that suddenly felt too big and too hostile. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the exhaustion or even the blisters on her feet. It was the silence in her head where Vera used to be. Her wolf had retreated so deep after that night under the blood moon that Riley couldn't feel her at all anymore. No whisper of instinct, no surge of supernatural strength, nothing. She was as good as human now, which in werewolf territory made her prey. That's why she'd kept walking until she reached neutral ground. The strip of unclaimed land between pack territories where rogues and outcasts gathered. Where someone like her might survive long enough to figure out what came next. If anything came next. Riley paused beside a creek to splash water on her face and drink deeply. The water was cold and clean, better than anything she'd tasted in days. She caught her reflection in the surface and barely recognized the woman staring back. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, hair hanging in limp tangles. She looked like what she was, a broken wolf with nowhere to go. "You look like hell." Riley spun around so fast she nearly fell into the creek. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, and her first thought was that he belonged in a magazine, not in the middle of nowhere talking to strays like her. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it and sharp features that suggested both danger and control. His clothes were expensive, dark jeans that fit perfectly, a black button-down that probably cost more than Riley had ever spent on an entire outfit, boots that had never seen serious hiking. But it was his eyes that made her take an instinctive step backward. Pale green, almost gray, and absolutely ruthless. This was a man who got what he wanted, always, and didn't particularly care who got hurt in the process. "I'm sorry," Riley stammered. "I didn't know anyone else was here." "I'll go." "No need." His voice was smooth, cultured. Nothing like the rough accents she was used to from pack wolves. "This is neutral territory. You have as much right to be here as I do." Riley's eyes darted around the clearing, looking for escape routes. Something about this man screamed predator, and without Vera to guide her instincts, she felt blind and vulnerable. "Your pack," she said. It wasn't a question. Even without her wolf senses, she could tell. There was something about the way he moved, the way he held himself. Pack wolves carried authority differently than rogues. "I am." He stepped closer, and Riley caught his scent, cedar and something darker, more complex. Power. And you were Pack. Recently. Heat flooded her cheeks. Could he smell her shame? Her failure? I left. Or were you kicked out? The casual way he said it, like he was asking about the weather, made Riley's temper flare. That's none of your business. To her surprise, he smiled. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and infinitely more dangerous. Fair enough. I'm Caden. He didn't offer a last name. In neutral territory, that was smart. Last names meant Pack affiliations, and Pack affiliations meant complications. Riley. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how she must look to this polished stranger. Riley. He repeated her name like he was testing how it sounded. Pretty name for someone who looks like she's been living rough for days. 3 days, she said without thinking, then cursed herself for giving away information. 3 days since you left your pack. Caden moved closer, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his pale eyes. That's not very long to be on your own. Most wolves don't make it past the first night without pack bonds to anchor them. I'm tougher than I look. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her hollow cheeks and trembling hands. No, he said finally. You're not tough at all. You're desperate. The words hit like a slap. Riley lifted her chin, trying to summon some dignity. If you're done insulting me, I'd like to finish getting water. I'm not insulting you. Caden leaned against a tree, looking completely relaxed despite the fact that they were strangers in dangerous territory. I'm making an observation. Desperation isn't always weakness, Riley. Sometimes it's opportunity. Something in his tone made her pause. What do you mean? I mean you're clearly running from something. Or someone. And I might be able to help. Riley laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the trees. Right. A complete stranger wants to help me out of the goodness of his heart. What's the catch? Smart girl. Caden's smile widened. There's always a catch. But first, tell me what happened. Why is a pack wolf wandering neutral territory looking like she hasn't eaten in days? Why do you care? Because I have a proposition for you. But I need to know what I'm working with first. Riley stared at him. Everything about this felt dangerous, but she was so tired of being alone. So tired of the silence in her head and the constant fear that she wasn't going to make it another day. My pack had a mating ceremony, she said finally. I was rejected. Again. How many times? The question was asked casually, but Riley caught the sharp interest in his eyes. 7. Caden whistled low. 7 rejections from the same wolf? You know about pack politics. I know about humiliation. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. I know what it's like to be cast aside by people who should have protected you. Something in his tone made Riley look at him more carefully. Beneath the expensive clothes and casual confidence, she caught a glimpse of old anger. Old pain. The wolf who rejected you, Caden continued. What's his name? Riley hesitated. Giving out pack information to strangers was dangerous. But what did it matter now? She was never going back. Jackson Crossfield. He's beta of the Moonridge pack. The change in Caden was instant and terrifying. His entire body went still, predator still, and those pale eyes turned absolutely arctic. For a moment, Riley thought he might shift right there in the clearing. Jackson Crossfield, he repeated, and his voice held enough venom to kill. Riley took a step back. Do you know him? I know the name. Caden's smile was all teeth now, sharp and predatory. I know the bloodline. And I know they deserve everything that's coming to them. The hair on Riley's arms stood up. Without her wolf to guide her, she couldn't tell if this man was just dangerous or actively threatening. But every human instinct she had was screaming at her to run. I should go, she said, backing toward the tree line. Wait. Caden's voice stopped her cold. Not because it was loud, but because of the command in it. The absolute authority that made her wolf-trained instincts snap to attention even without Vera there to interpret them. I told you I had a proposition. I'm not interested. You haven't heard it yet. Riley kept backing away. I don't need to. Whatever you're selling, I can't afford it. Actually, you can't afford not to hear this. Caden straightened, and suddenly he seemed much larger, much more intimidating. Because in about 2 hours, the rogues who've been tracking you for the past day are going to catch up. And a lone wolf with no pack bonds and no fighting skills isn't going to survive that encounter. Riley's blood turned to ice. You're lying. 3 males, probably brothers based on their scent markers. They've been following you since yesterday morning, staying just far enough back that you wouldn't notice without wolf senses. Caden's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. They're waiting for full dark to make their move. How do you? Riley stopped. Of course he could scent them. He was pack, which meant his senses were fully intact. Unlike hers. So here's my proposition, Caden continued, ignoring her panic. I can offer you protection. Status. A place in a pack where you'll never be rejected or humiliated again. Riley stared at him. In exchange for what? Marriage. The word hung between them like a bomb. Riley actually laughed, a hysterical sound that made birds take flight from nearby trees. Marriage? To a complete stranger? Are you insane? A contract marriage, Caden clarified, not seeming bothered by her reaction. Temporary, purely business. You get protection and status, I get. He paused, considering. Let's call it a political advantage. Political advantage, Riley repeated. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning Jackson Crossfield and his pack have something that belongs to me. And the connection to their former pack member might help me get it back. The pieces clicked together in Riley's mind, painting a picture she didn't like. You want to use me to get to Jackson. I want to give you the chance to get revenge on the people who treated you like garbage. Caden's voice dropped, becoming almost hypnotic. Think about it, Riley. How would it feel to walk back into Moonridge territory as the Riley of a powerful pack? To have Jackson Crossfield bow to you instead of the other way around? The image he painted was seductive. Riley could almost see Jackson's face when he realized she wasn't the broken, desperate wolf he'd rejected. Could almost taste the sweet satisfaction of showing him exactly what he'd thrown away. But it felt too good to be true. And in Riley's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. What pack? She asked. Mine. Which is? Caden smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Riley had ever seen. Shadow Creek. The name hit Riley like a physical blow. Shadow Creek. Even isolated as she'd been in Moonridge, she knew that name. Everyone did. Shadow Creek was the pack that other packs whispered about. Ruthless, powerful, and led by an alpha so dangerous that most wolves wouldn't even speak his name out loud. They said he'd killed his own father to take control. They said his pack was made up of rogues and outcasts who'd do anything for power. They said crossing Shadow Creek was a death sentence. You're him, Riley whispered. You're the Ruthless Alpha. Caden's smile widened. Guilty as charged. Though I prefer Caden Blackthorn. It sounds more civilized. Riley felt like the ground was shifting under her feet. Shadow Creek and Moonridge are enemies. Have been for decades. Longer than that. My grandfather had his throat torn out by Ethan Grayson's father over territorial disputes. My father died in a hunting accident that had Moonridge wolves sent all over it. Caden's voice was conversational, but his eyes had gone deadly. So yes, we have history. And you want me to help you get revenge. I want to offer you the chance to take back your power. Caden stepped closer, and Riley could feel the predatory energy rolling off him in waves. Think about what they did to you, Riley. 7 times they humiliated you in front of your entire pack. 7 times they made you feel worthless. Stop. Jackson Crossfield looked at you like you were something disgusting on his shoe. Your own pack mates whispered about your weakness behind your back. They made you feel like you deserved to be alone and broken. Stop. Riley's voice was stronger now, but her hands were shaking. Now imagine walking into their territory as my Riley. Imagine the look on Jackson's face when he realizes he rejected the mate of the most powerful alpha in the region. Imagine him having to show you respect, having to acknowledge that he was wrong about you. The fantasy was intoxicating. Riley could see it so clearly, herself walking into the Moonridge pack house in expensive clothes, radiating confidence and power. Jackson's shock when he realized who she'd become. The pack members who'd pitted her suddenly scrambling to curry favor. It would be perfect revenge. But revenge came with a price. It always did. What's the catch? Riley asked. And don't tell me there isn't one. Men like you don't offer marriage contracts to desperate strangers out of altruism. Caden studied her for a long moment, something like approval flickering in his eyes. The catch is that being my Riley, even temporarily, isn't a game. Shadow Creek has enemies. Lots of them. Being connected to me puts a target on your back. Bigger than the one I already have as a lone wolf? Different. More dangerous. Caden's expression grew serious. I won't lie to you, Riley. This isn't a fairy tale. I'm not offering you happily ever after. I'm offering you a chance to be something other than a victim. Riley looked around the clearing, taking in the darkening sky and the too quiet forest. Somewhere out there, rogues were tracking her. Soon they'd find her, and then... She didn't want to think about what happened to lone wolves who fell into the wrong hands. How long? She asked. The contract? 6 months, minimum. Long enough to accomplish what we both want. And after that? After that, you're free to go wherever you want. With enough money to start over properly and the protection of knowing that anyone who hurts you answers to me. It was a deal with the devil. Riley knew that. Caden Blackthorn was dangerous, possibly more dangerous than anything she was running from. But he was also offering her something she'd never had, power. The chance to be more than Moonridge packs reject. The chance to make Jackson regret every cruel word he'd ever said to her. I need guarantees, Riley said finally. Name them. I want it in writing. A real contract, not just your word. Done. I want my own money. Not an allowance, not access to your accounts. My own account that you can't touch. Reasonable. And I want to know exactly what this revenge plan involves. No surprises, no being kept in the dark. Caden considered this for longer. Some things will need to remain confidential for your own safety. But I'll tell you everything I can. Riley nodded. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than she'd expected. One more thing. This is business only. I'm not really going to be your mate. We're not. She gestured vaguely between them. Not unless you want to be, Caden said, and something in his voice made heat pool in her stomach. But no, the contract doesn't require physical intimacy. Though we'll need to convince people that our relationship is real. Meaning? Meaning we'll need to act like a couple in public. Share a living space. Attend pack functions together. Caden's smile was wickedly amused. Think you can handle pretending to be madly in love with me? Riley looked at him, really looked at him. Devastatingly handsome, dangerous, powerful enough to make her former pack tremble. Under different circumstances, pretending to be in love with him wouldn't be hard at all. Which was exactly why it was dangerous. I can handle it, she said. Then we have a deal? Caden extended his hand. Riley stared at it for a long moment. Once she shook his hand, there would be no going back. She'd be tied to the Ruthless Alpha, committed to whatever scheme he had in mind for Moonridge Pack. But the alternative was facing whatever was hunting her alone. And she was so tired of being alone. We have a deal, Riley said, and shook his hand. The moment their skin touched, something electric passed between them. Not the mate bond. Riley knew what that felt like, had felt its absence keenly, but something else. Something that made her wolf stir for the first time in days, just a flutter of interest deep in her mind. Caden felt it too. She could see it in the way his eyes sharpened, the way his grip on her hand tightened just slightly. Interesting, he murmured, then released her hand and stepped back. We should go. Those rogues will be here soon, and I'd rather not have to kill them if we can avoid it. Go where? Home. Caden's smile was sharp and predatory. Time to introduce you to your new pack, Riley Cross. The name sent a shiver down her spine. Riley Cross. Riley of Shadow Creek Pack. It had a nice ring to it. Chapter 3. The Shadow Creek Pack house was nothing like what Riley had expected. Instead of the dark, fortress-like structure she'd imagined, Caden's home was a sprawling modern mansion nestled in the mountains, all glass and steel and clean lines. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the valley below, and the interior was decorated in warm neutrals that somehow managed to feel both luxurious and comfortable. Not what you pictured? Caden asked, noting her expression as he led her through the main living area. I expected something more. Riley searched for the right word. Ominous? Disappointed? Surprised? She ran her fingers along the back of a buttersoft leather sofa. This is beautiful. I may be ruthless, but I'm not uncivilized. Caden's tone was dry. I spend a lot of time here. It should be pleasant. Riley followed him up a sweeping staircase to the second floor. The hallway was lined with what looked like original artwork, abstract pieces that somehow captured the wild beauty of the mountains surrounding them. Your room, Caden said, opening a door near the end of the hall. Riley stepped inside and immediately felt her breath catch. The room was gorgeous, a king-sized bed with crisp white linens, a sitting area by tall windows, and a bathroom that was bigger than her childhood bedroom. Fresh flowers sat on the nightstand, and someone had laid out clothes on the bed. I took the liberty of having some things brought in, Caden said from the doorway. We'll need to go shopping soon, but this should get you started. Riley fingered the soft cashmere of a sweater. Designer labels, expensive fabrics, everything in her size. How did you know what I'd need? I'm observant. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her reaction. And I have resources. Resources. Riley set the sweater down carefully. Meaning you had me investigated. I had you researched. There's a difference. Is there? Investigation implies I was looking for dirt. Research means I wanted to understand who you are. Caden's voice was matter-of-fact. Your parents died in a car accident when you were 16. You were raised by your grandmother until she passed 3 years ago. You worked as a teacher's aide at the Pack school until recently. You have no criminal record, no outstanding debts, and no romantic relationships aside from your unfortunate fixation on Jackson Crossfield. Riley's cheeks burned. Hearing her life reduced to a few clinical facts was mortifying. Anything else? You're stronger than you think you are. And you're smarter than anyone in your former pack gave you credit for. The unexpected compliment caught her off guard. How would you know that? Because stupid people don't survive 3 days alone in neutral territory. And weak people don't walk away from everything they've ever known, even when staying would destroy them. Riley looked out the window at the mountains, trying to process everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been a broken wolf drinking from a creek. Now she was standing in a mansion, talking to the most feared alpha in the region like they were old friends. I should shower, she said finally. And change clothes. I still smell like the forest. Good idea. We have dinner in an hour. We? The pack leadership. They'll want to meet their new Riley. Riley's stomach dropped. Already? But we just got here. I haven't had time to prepare, to figure out what I'm supposed to say. Riley. Caden's voice was firm but not unkind. You're not playing a part. You're not pretending to be someone you're not. You're simply being yourself in a new context. Myself got rejected 7 times. Yourself was being judged by people who couldn't see past their own prejudices. Caden stepped into the room, and Riley was suddenly very aware of how small the space felt with him in it. Trust me, my pack judges people differently. How? By results. By loyalty. By what they contribute to the whole. His pale eyes met hers. By strength that has nothing to do with how fast you can shift or how loud you can howl. Riley wanted to believe him. Desperately. But 23 years of being told she wasn't enough was hard to overcome. What if they don't accept me? They will. Caden's certainty was absolute. Because I'm telling them to. And because once they get to know you, they'll see what I see. Which is someone who's been underestimated her entire life. Someone with untapped potential who just needs the right environment to flourish. The word sent warmth through Riley's chest. When was the last time someone had spoken about her potential instead of her limitations? Go shower, Caden said, heading for the door. And Riley? Stop thinking of yourself as Moonridge's reject. Your shadow creaks Riley now. Act like it. He left her alone with that command echoing in her ears. Riley looked at herself in the mirror across the room, hollow-eyed, dirty, wearing clothes that had seen better days. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd lost everything. But Caden was right. That wasn't who she had to be anymore. 45 minutes later, Riley barely recognized herself. The shower had washed away days of grime and exhaustion, and the clothes Caden had provided fit like they'd been tailored for her. The dark jeans hugged her curves without being too tight, and the emerald green sweater brought out the color in her eyes. Someone had even provided makeup, high-end products that made her look polished and confident. She was studying herself in the mirror, trying to summon the courage to go downstairs, when Caden knocked on her door. Come in, she called. He entered and stopped short when he saw her. For just a moment, his carefully controlled expression slipped, revealing something that looked almost like hunger. You look. He paused, seeming to search for words. Beautiful. The compliment shouldn't have affected her so strongly. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. But the way he was looking at her, like she was something precious and surprising, made her pulse quicken. The clothes are perfect, she said, trying to break the tension. How did you? I'm good at reading people. Caden's voice was rougher than usual. Are you ready to meet the pack? Riley nodded, not trusting her voice. As they walked downstairs together, she was hyper-aware of his presence beside her. The way he moved with predatory grace, the subtle scent of cedar and something darker that made her wolf stir restlessly. Vera was still there, Riley realized with surprise. Buried deep and damaged, but not gone. Not completely. The dining room held about 20 people, all of whom stood when Caden entered. Riley had expected to see the rough, dangerous rogues that Moonridge whispered about. Instead, she found herself looking at an eclectic group that included everyone from a woman in a business suit to a man with tattooed arms who looked like he could bench press a car. Everyone, Caden said, his hands settling on the small of Riley's back. The touch sent electricity through her entire body. I'd like you to meet Riley Cross, my mate and your new Riley. Riley tried not to flinch at the word mate. She'd known they'd have to sell the fiction, but hearing it out loud made it feel dangerously real. Riley, Caden continued, this is my beta, Ethan Steele. A tall man with silver-streaked hair stepped forward. He was probably in his 50s, with intelligent dark eyes and a presence that commanded respect. When he took her hand, his grip was firm but not crushing. Welcome to Shadow Creek, Ethan said. His voice was warm, but Riley caught the assessing look he gave her. We're honored to have you. Thank you, Riley managed. The introductions continued. Sarah, the woman in the business suit, was the pack's legal counsel. Jake, the tattooed man, was head of security. Dr. Amanda Torres handled medical needs. Each person welcomed her with what seemed like genuine warmth, though Riley noticed they all looked to Caden for cues on how to treat her. Please, sit, Caden said, pulling out a chair for her at his right hand. I know you must be hungry. Riley was starving, but she was also terrified of making a mistake. These people were being kind, but they were also clearly sizing her up. One wrong move could shatter the fragile acceptance she was being offered. The meal was delicious, some kind of herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, but Riley barely tasted it. She was too busy trying to follow the conversation, which ranged from pack business to local politics to what sounded like investment strategies. The Morrison pack is still pushing for territorial expansion, Sarah was saying. They've made 3 formal requests this month. Denied, Caden said without looking up from his plate. They had their chance to negotiate in good faith. They chose confrontation instead. They're not going to give up easily, Ethan warned. Morrison's Alpha is young and ambitious. He sees taking Shadow Creek territory as a way to prove himself. Let him try. Caden's voice was utterly calm, but Riley caught the flash of something dangerous in his eyes. It's been too long since we've had a good fight. Fighting should be a last resort, Riley said without thinking. Not a first one. The table went silent. Riley felt heat flood her cheeks as she realized everyone was staring at her. She'd just contradicted the Alpha in front of his entire leadership team. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to. No, Caden said, and there was something like approval in his voice. Go on. You were saying fighting should be a last resort. Riley glanced around the table. Ethan was watching her with sharp interest, while the others looked curious rather than hostile. Maybe she hadn't completely destroyed her credibility. I just think there might be other ways to handle territorial disputes, she said carefully. Morrison's Alpha is young, right? Maybe he's just trying to prove himself to his pack. What if there was a way to give him that proof without actual conflict? Such as? Caden leaned back in his chair, giving her his full attention. Joint training exercises. Collaborative hunts. Something that would let him show his pack he's strong enough to deal with Shadow Creek as equals rather than enemies. Riley's voice grew more confident as she spoke. It's harder to attack someone you've worked with. Shared experiences create bonds. Interesting, Ethan said. And if he refuses? Then you've demonstrated that you tried diplomacy first. When you do have to fight, you'll have the moral high ground. The table was quiet for a moment. Then Jake, the security chief, chuckled. I like her. She thinks like a strategist. She does, Caden agreed, and the pride in his voice made Riley's chest warm. What else would you suggest? For the next hour, Riley found herself drawn into discussions about pack politics, territory management, and alliance building. To her surprise, she had opinions about all of it. More than that, she had good opinions. Ideas that made the others nod thoughtfully or ask follow-up questions. When was the last time anyone had asked for her input on anything important? When had anyone ever listened to her ideas without immediately dismissing them? We should probably let Riley get some rest, Caden said finally. It's been a long day. As the group began to disperse, Ethan approached her. Could I speak with you privately for a moment? Riley glanced at Caden, who nodded. I'll be upstairs when you're done. Ethan waited until they were alone before speaking. You handled that well. Better than I expected. Thank you, I think. It was a compliment. Ethan's smile was genuine. I've been Caden's beta for 15 years. I've seen him bring home strays before, but never someone he introduced as his mate. Riley's stomach clenched. I'm not really. I know what you are and what you're not, Ethan interrupted gently. What concerns me is that Caden might be forgetting the distinction. I don't understand. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Caden has been planning his revenge against Moonridge Pack for over a decade. It's consumed him. Shaped every decision he's made, every alliance he's formed. And now you're here, and suddenly he's looking at you like you're not just a means to an end. He's not, Riley started, then stopped. Because she'd felt it too, hadn't she? The way his eyes lingered on her, the careful way he touched her, the pride in his voice when she'd contributed to the dinner conversation. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," Ethan continued. "I'm saying it because I care about him. And because I think you might be starting to care about him too." Riley's cheeks burned. "This is just business. Is it?" Ethan's voice was kind but relentless. "Because if it is, then you need to be very careful. Caden doesn't do anything halfway. If he starts to see you as more than a contract partner, it could compromise everything he's worked for. And if he doesn't, then you need to protect yourself. Because when this is over, when he's gotten his revenge, you'll be the one left picking up the pieces." Ethan squeezed her shoulder gently. "I like you, Riley. You're good for him, and you're good for this pack. But don't forget that you're playing with fire. And fire burns everything it touches." With that warning, he left her alone in the dining room. Riley stood there for a long moment, processing his words. Then she made her way upstairs, her mind churning. She found Caden in his study, sitting behind a massive desk covered with papers. He looked up when she entered, and that same heat flashed in his eyes. "How did it go with Ethan?" "He likes me, I think." Riley perched on the edge of a chair across from his desk. "He also warned me about you." "Did he?" Caden's voice was neutral. "What did he say?" "That you don't do anything halfway. That I should be careful not to get too attached because this is just business." Caden set down his pen and leaned back. "And what did you tell him?" "That he was right. This is just business." "Is it?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Riley met his gaze steadily, even though her heart was racing. "It has to be," she said finally. "Doesn't it?" "Does it?" Caden stood and walked around the desk. Riley's breath caught as he approached, but she forced herself to stay still. "Because I have to admit, when I saw you at dinner tonight, contributing ideas, making my pack laugh, fitting in like you belonged there, it didn't feel like business. Caden. And when I look at you now, in clothes I chose for you, in my house, it doesn't feel like business either." He was standing right in front of her now, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Riley's wolf stirred restlessly, responding to his nearness in ways that should have been impossible. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "I know." His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her lower lip. "But I've never been good at staying away from dangerous things." Riley's eyes fluttered closed. For just a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like if this were real. If Caden Blackthorne had chosen her not for revenge, but because he genuinely wanted her. Then reality crashed back, and she pulled away. "We can't," she said, her voice shakier than she'd like. "You said it yourself, this is about getting back at Moonridge Pack. I can't be another complication." Caden's hand dropped to his side. "You're right. This is about revenge." "Good." Riley stood on unsteady legs. "I should go to bed. Early day tomorrow, right?" "Right. We have the Supernatural Council Gala tomorrow night. Our first public appearance as a couple. I'll be ready." "I know you will." Riley made it to the door before Caden's voice stopped her. "Riley?" She turned back. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "Ethan is wrong about one thing. You're not just a means to an end anymore. You're becoming something much more dangerous than that." "What?" "You're becoming someone I actually care about." Riley fled to her room, Caden's words echoing in her mind. She pressed her back against the closed door, trying to calm her racing heart. This was supposed to be simple. A business arrangement. 6 months of playing pretend, then freedom. But nothing about Caden Blackthorne was simple. And the way he looked at her, touched her, made her feel things she'd never experienced before. Her wolf was stirring more strongly now, responding to the Alpha's presence in ways that should have been impossible. Vera had been broken, damaged beyond repair. But somehow, being near Caden was calling her back. Riley crawled into the luxurious bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. In one day, she'd gone from a broken reject to the Riley of the most powerful pack in the region. She'd discovered she had a talent for strategy and leadership. And she'd started to feel things for a man who was supposed to be using her for revenge. Meanwhile, 300 miles away in Moonridge territory, Jackson Crossfield was about to receive news that would change everything. But Riley didn't know that yet. All she knew was that tomorrow night, she'd have to pretend to be madly in love with Caden Blackthorne in front of the entire supernatural community. And the terrifying part was that it might not be pretending at all. Chapter 4. The Supernatural Council Gala had been everything Riley never knew she wanted. Held in a restored Victorian mansion in the heart of neutral territory, the event brought together representatives from every supernatural community within 500 miles. Vampires in perfectly tailored suits mingled with fae whose beauty was almost painful to look at. Witches wore designer gowns that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, while shifters of every variety moved through the crowd with predatory grace. And Riley had belonged there. Not as the broken reject trailing behind someone else, but as Caden Blackthorne's mate, his equal partner. The midnight blue gown he'd chosen for her fit like a dream, and the way people looked at her, with respect, with interest, with the kind of attention she'd never received before, had been intoxicating. "You were magnificent tonight," Caden murmured as their car wound through the mountain roads back to Shadow Creek territory. The partition between them and the driver was up, giving them privacy in the spacious back seat. "I felt magnificent," Riley admitted, then laughed at her own honesty. "God, is that terrible? I've never felt like that before. Like I mattered." "You do matter." Caden's voice was intense in the darkness. "More than you know." Riley turned to look at him. The formal black tuxedo made him devastatingly handsome, but it was the way he'd looked at her all evening that had made her pulse race. Like she was the only person in the room worth his attention. Dangerous thoughts. Ethan's warning echoed in her mind, but it was getting harder to remember why caring about Caden was a bad idea. "The vampire ambassador seemed interested in our territorial agreements," she said, forcing herself to focus on business. "Did you notice how he kept asking about our northern borders?" "I noticed." Caden's smile was sharp. "Gage Blackwood has been trying to expand vampire influence in this region for decades. He sees opportunity in the current pack conflicts. Should we be worried? We should be prepared. Your suggestion about joint training exercises with the Morrison pack is looking more valuable by the day." Pride warmed Riley's chest. Her ideas mattered here. She mattered. The car suddenly swerved violently to the left, throwing Riley against Caden's side. Through the partition, she could hear their driver cursing. "What the hell?" Caden started, then his expression changed. His nostrils flared, and his entire body went rigid. "Rogues." "What?" "Get down." His voice carried alpha command, and Riley found herself ducking instinctively. "We're under attack." The windshield exploded inward. Their driver, a young wolf named Tyler, cried out as glass shredded his face and arms. The car careened off the road, crashing through underbrush before slamming into a tree with bone-jarring force. Riley's head snapped forward, and stars exploded across her vision. When her sight cleared, she saw Caden already moving, his tuxedo jacket torn as he shifted partially, not full wolf, but something between human and beast that was purely lethal. "Stay in the car," he ordered, his voice more growl than words. "Caden. Stay down and stay quiet." He kicked open his door and disappeared into the darkness outside. Almost immediately, Riley heard the sounds of combat, snarls, snapping teeth, the wet sound of claws meeting flesh. Tyler was slumped unconscious over the steering wheel, blood running from multiple cuts. Riley pressed her hands against the worst of his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding, but she could hear the fight outside escalating. A howl of pain made her blood freeze. Caden's howl. Without thinking, Riley threw open her door and stumbled into the night. The scene that greeted her was out of a nightmare. 6 massive wolves had surrounded Caden, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. Rogues, as he'd said, wolves who'd been cast out from their packs and had turned feral. They moved with the coordination of a pack but the viciousness of animals who'd forgotten what it meant to be human. Caden was holding his own, but barely. Blood streamed from gashes on his arms and chest, and one of the rogues had its teeth buried in his shoulder. "Get back in the car," he shouted when he saw her. But Riley couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Because deep in her mind, something was stirring. Something that had been dormant for so long she'd thought it was gone forever. Vera. Her wolf. And she was angry. The largest of the rogues, a black wolf with scars covering half his face, broke away from the pack. His red eyes fixed on Riley, and she could see the madness in them. The complete absence of humanity. He charged. Time slowed. Riley heard Caden scream her name, heard the rogue's claws scraping against stone as he launched himself at her throat. She should have been terrified. Should have been helpless. Instead, power exploded through her body like lightning. Her bones elongated and shifted with a crack that echoed through the forest. Silver-white fur sprouted across her skin as her muscles expanded and strengthened. Her face pushed forward into a muzzle filled with razor-sharp teeth. But this wasn't the weak, struggling shift she'd managed before. This was something else entirely. Power coursed through her new form, making her feel invincible. Making her feel deadly. The charging rogue hit her mid-transformation and went flying. Riley, or rather, the massive silver wolf she'd become, landed on her feet with predatory grace. She was huge. Larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, including the rogues surrounding them. Her fur gleamed like moonlight, and when she snarled, the sound was pure menace. The rogues froze. Even in their madness, they recognized an alpha-class wolf when they saw one. Riley didn't give them time to process the threat. She moved like liquid death, taking down the nearest rogue with a bite that crushed his windpipe. Another tried to flee, but she was faster, her claws raking across his spine and dropping him in a twitching heap. The remaining rogues turned on her as one, but she was already moving. This was what she'd been born for, she realized with crystal clarity. Not to be weak and submissive, but to be a weapon. To be death on four legs when those she cared about were threatened. Within minutes, it was over. 6 rogues lay dead around her, and Riley stood panting in the sudden silence. Steam rose from her fur, and her eyes, when she caught her reflection in a puddle of blood, were glowing gold. "Riley." Caden's voice was soft, careful. She turned to look at him and saw something like awe in his expression. He was still in his partial shift, blood covering his chest and arms, but he was alive. Safe. That was all that mattered. She tried to shift back to human form, but her body wouldn't obey. The power that had awakened in her was too much, too overwhelming. She was trapped in wolf form, and panic began to set in. "Easy," Caden murmured, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "You're okay. You're safe." Riley whined, a sound of distress that echoed through the forest. "I know," Caden said, reaching her side. "I know it's overwhelming. The first time alpha power manifests, it's like trying to contain a wildfire." Alpha power. Riley's wolf mind latched onto the phrase. She wasn't just any wolf. She was an alpha. "Let me help you," Caden continued, his hand hovering near her head. "Trust me, Riley." She looked into his pale green eyes and saw nothing but honesty. Whatever else he might be, however he might be using her, he wouldn't hurt her. She was certain of that. Riley lowered her massive head, and Caden's hand came to rest between her ears. The moment he touched her, warmth flowed through the contact. His alpha power called to hers, showing her how to pull the wildfire back under control. Slowly, carefully, Riley managed to shift back to human form. The process left her naked and shaking, collapsed in the dirt beside the car. Caden immediately stripped off his ruined jacket and wrapped it around her. "How?" she gasped. "How is this possible? I've never been able to shift like that. Never been that strong." "Because you're not what you thought you were." Caden's voice was gentle as he helped her to her feet. You're not a weak wolf, Riley. You're a dormant alpha whose power was suppressed. Suppressed how? I don't know yet. But we're going to find out. Tyler was starting to come around, groaning as consciousness returned. Caden helped him out of the wrecked car, checking his injuries with practiced efficiency. Can you call for backup? Caden asked him. Tyler nodded weakly. Already sent the emergency signal. Ethan should be here within the hour. Good. Caden turned back to Riley, his expression unreadable. We need to talk. There are things you need to know. What things? But before Caden could answer, Riley felt something change in the air around them. A shift in energy that made her newly awakened wolf senses scream warnings. Caden, she said urgently. He felt it too. His head snapped up, nostrils flaring as he scented the wind. More rogues, he said grimly. A lot more. Red eyes began to glow in the darkness surrounding them. Dozens of them, forming a circle that was slowly closing in. Riley's heart sank as she counted them. 20, maybe 25 rogues. Far too many for them to fight, even with her newfound power. They were waiting, Caden realized. The first attack was just to separate us from help. What do we do? Caden was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he considered their options. When he looked at her again, there was something desperate in his eyes. There's only one way to survive this, he said. But you're not going to like it. Tell me. I need to mark you. Properly mark you as my mate. It's the only way to fully unlock your alpha power, and we're going to need everything you've got. Riley stared at him. A mating mark was permanent. It would bind them together for life, create a bond that couldn't be broken. You said this was just business, she whispered. I know what I said. Pain flashed across Caden's features. But I won't let you die because I was too proud to do what's necessary. The rogues were getting closer. Riley could hear them moving through the underbrush, coordinating their attack with the intelligence of wolves who hadn't completely lost their humanity. Do it, she said. Riley. Do it, Caden. Whatever it takes to keep us alive. He pulled her against him then, his mouth finding the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. I'm sorry, he whispered against her skin. I'm so damn sorry. His teeth sank into her flesh. The pain was incredible, like being struck by lightning. But it lasted only a moment before something else took its place, a connection so intense it stole her breath. Power flowed between them, his alpha strength merging with hers, amplifying both until the air around them practically crackled with energy. But with the power came something else. Images. Memories that weren't her own flooding her mind with devastating clarity. A younger Caden, maybe 12 years old, hiding in a closet while screams echoed through his family's home. The scent of blood and death and rogues who'd been let in by someone they trusted. His parents torn apart in their own living room. His younger sister's broken body in the hallway. And standing over it all, blood-covered and grinning, was a wolf she recognized even in memory. Older, grayer, but unmistakably Jackson's father. The previous alpha of Moonridge Pack. We had a deal, Cross, the older wolf was saying to Caden's dying father. You give us the Eastern Territories, we let your family live. You broke that deal. I gave you everything you asked for, Caden's father gasped. Not everything. You held back the mineral rights. Did you think we wouldn't find out? More images flashed through the bond. Caden barely escaping into the night. Years of training, planning, building Shadow Creek into something strong enough to take revenge. The careful cultivation of allies and resources, all leading to this moment. All leading to her. Riley gasped as the memories faded, leaving her reeling from the intensity of Caden's pain. She understood now. Understood why he'd sought her out, why he'd offered her that contract. She wasn't just a way to get close to Jackson. She was a weapon he'd forged specifically to destroy the bloodline that had murdered his family. Now you know, Caden said quietly, his arms still around her. The mating mark on her neck throbbed with new sensation. Now you understand what you really are to me. Riley wanted to be angry. Should have been furious at being used so completely. But all she could think about was that 12-year-old boy hiding in a closet, listening to his family die. We'll deal with this later, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Right now, we have bigger problems. The rogues had stopped circling. They were getting ready to attack. But Riley felt different now. The power flowing through the mate bond was intoxicating, making her feel like she could take on an army. Her wolf, Vera, was fully present for the first time in her life, not weak or broken, but magnificent and deadly. Together? Caden asked. Together. They shifted in perfect synchronization, the bond between them making their movements flow like a choreographed dance. Riley's wolf was even larger now, her silver fur gleaming with an inner light that made the rogues hesitate. But Caden was something else entirely. His wolf was massive, coal-black with eyes like chips of ice. This was what a true alpha looked like, death incarnate, beautiful and terrible. The rogues attacked as one, but they might as well have been attacking a force of nature. Riley and Caden moved as a unit, their bond allowing them to anticipate each other's actions, to fight with a coordination that was almost supernatural. Riley tore through her opponents like they were made of paper, her claws and teeth finding vital spots with deadly precision. Beside her, Caden was a whirlwind of destruction, dropping rogues with efficient brutality. Within minutes, the forest floor was littered with bodies. The few rogues who survived fled into the darkness, their howls of terror echoing through the night. Riley and Caden stood panting in the sudden silence, steam rising from their fur. The mate bond hummed between them, satisfied and triumphant. When they shifted back to human form, the intensity of the connection remained. Riley could feel Caden's emotions like they were her own, his relief that she was safe, his guilt over marking her without her true consent, his growing feelings that he was trying so hard to suppress. The power you just displayed, Caden said, wrapping his jacket around her again. That's not normal for a newly awakened alpha. Someone definitely suppressed your abilities. The question is who and why. Riley nodded, still processing everything that had happened. The mating mark on her neck pulsed with warmth, reminding her that everything had changed. They were bonded now, connected in ways that went beyond their contract. We need to figure out what was done to you, Caden continued. And we need to prepare for war. Because after tonight, Moonridge is going to know you're alive. And they're going to know you're mine. Let them come, Riley said, surprised by the venom in her own voice. After what I saw in your memories, after what they did to your family, let them try to take what's yours. Caden's eyes darkened. You're not just mine because of the mark, Riley. You understand that, right? This isn't just about the bond. I know. Riley met his gaze steadily. But we still need to talk about what this means. About what you want from me beyond revenge. I want, Caden started, then stopped as headlights appeared through the trees. Later. Ethan is here. As Shadow Creek wolves poured into the clearing, Riley touched the mating mark on her neck. She was bound to Caden now, tied to his quest for vengeance whether she liked it or not. But looking at the carnage around them, feeling the power still coursing through her veins, she realized something important. She wasn't just along for the ride anymore. She was a weapon. And she was finally ready to be wielded. Chapter 5. Riley woke to the sensation of being watched. She sat up in bed, automatically reaching for the mating mark on her neck. 3 days had passed since the rogue attack, and the bond with Caden still felt raw and new. She could sense him somewhere in the house, his emotions a constant hum in the back of her mind, tension, protectiveness, and something deeper he kept carefully guarded. But the feeling of being observed wasn't coming from the mate bond. This was something else. Riley slipped out of bed and padded to the window. Dawn was just breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The view was breathtaking, but it wasn't what caught her attention. At the edge of the property, just beyond the tree line, stood a familiar figure. Jackson Crossfield. Riley's breath caught. Even at this distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man preparing for battle. He was alone, which was either very brave or very stupid. Shadow Creek territory was the last place a Moonridge wolf should be standing. The bedroom door burst open behind her. Caden stood in the doorway, partially dressed and radiating lethal energy. The mate bond had alerted him to her distress the moment she'd seen Jackson. "What is it?" he demanded, then followed her gaze to the window. His expression turned murderous. "Son of a bitch." "He's alone," Riley said quietly. "He's on my territory." Caden's voice was pure alpha command. "Ethan is already mobilizing security. We can have him surrounded in minutes." "Wait." Riley placed a hand on Caden's arm, feeling the tension coiled there like a spring. "Look at his posture. He's not here to fight. Then why is he here?" Riley studied Jackson's stance more carefully. He stood with his hands visible, his head slightly bowed. There was something almost supplicant about his position. "I think he's here under a flag of truce," she said. Caden's laugh was harsh. "A flag of truce? From the pack that's been trying to destroy mine for generations? Only one way to find out." Riley turned from the window, already reaching for clothes. "We need to meet with him." "Like hell we do." "Caden." Riley's voice carried a note of command that surprised them both. The mating bond had awakened something in her beyond just physical power, a confidence she'd never possessed before. "If Jackson Crossfield is standing on your territory alone at dawn, it's not because he suddenly developed a death wish. He has something to say. Then he can say it from a cell. He came here for me." Riley pulled on jeans and a sweater, her movements quick and efficient. "Whatever he wants, it's connected to me. I need to hear it." Caden was quiet for a long moment, conflict playing across his features. The mate bond let Riley feel his struggle, the desire to protect her warring with his recognition that she was right. "Fine," he said finally. "But we do this my way. Full security, controlled environment, and if he so much as breathes wrong, I'm taking his head off." Agreed. An hour later, Riley found herself sitting across from Jackson Crossfield in Shadow Creek's formal conference room. The space was designed to intimidate, with its massive table and floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the pack's territory. Caden sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, his presence a constant reminder of how much had changed. Jackson looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, dark circles ringed his eyes, and there was a hollow quality to his expression that spoke of sleepless nights and regret. When his gaze met Riley's, she saw something there she'd never seen before: pain. "Riley." His voice was rough, like he'd been shouting. "Thank God you're alive." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd expected anger, maybe desperation. Not relief. Not what looked suspiciously like genuine emotion. "No thanks to you," Caden's voice was arctic. "She's alive because I protected her. Something you never bothered to do." Jackson's jaw tightened, but he didn't take the bait. Instead, he kept his eyes on Riley. "When we found your clothes by the river, when the search teams couldn't find a body, I thought I'd lost you forever. You rejected me," Riley said flatly. 7 times. You made it very clear you didn't want me. I was wrong." The admission seemed to physically hurt him. "I was so goddamn wrong about everything." Caden leaned forward, his expression predatory. "This is touching, really. But if you think you can just waltz in here and—" "I'm not here to apologize," Jackson interrupted, finally tearing his gaze away from Riley. "Though I should. I'm here because Riley is in danger. More danger than either of you realize. The only danger she's in is from your pack," Caden said. "No." Jackson reached into his jacket, moving slowly to avoid triggering the guards stationed around the room. He pulled out a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "The danger is from what she is." Riley felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What I am?" "Your bloodline, Riley. Your real bloodline." Jackson slid the journal across the table. 3 days ago, my father's effects were finally catalogued. This was hidden in his private safe, along with documents that explain everything. Riley picked up the journal with trembling hands. The leather was soft with age, and when she opened it, the pages crackled. The writing inside was in an old-fashioned script, difficult to read but unmistakably powerful. Property of Madeline Silverborn, last alpha of the Silver Moon Pack, she read aloud. Her voice caught. Madeline. That was my mother's name. Your mother wasn't Madeline Ashwood, Jackson said quietly. She was Madeline Silverborn. And you, Riley, are the last descendant of the Silver Moon Pack. The room went silent. Riley looked up from the journal to find both men staring at her with expressions of shock. Even Caden, who seemed to know everything, looked stunned. That's impossible, Caden said finally. The Silver Moon Pack was destroyed 50 years ago. Not destroyed, Jackson corrected. Disbanded. Scattered. Hidden. He gestured to the journal. It's all in there. The Silver Moon Pack was the original pack in this territory. Both Moonridge and Shadow Creek split off from them during the Great Division. Riley flipped through the pages, seeing dates and names and family trees that made her head spin. Why would they hide this from me? Why would my mother lie about who she was? Because your bloodline carries something that both our packs have been searching for. Jackson's voice was heavy with implication. The Silver Moon Pack wasn't just any pack, Riley. They were the peacekeepers. The mediators. Their alpha bloodline carried the ability to create binding treaties between supernatural communities. Treaties? Riley looked up from the journal. What kind of treaties? The kind that could unite the werewolf packs under one banner, Caden said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Or the kind that could destroy them if used wrong. Jackson nodded grimly. Your blood can create unbreakable bonds between packs. Force them to work together, end territorial disputes, create lasting peace. But it can also do the opposite, sever existing bonds, turn allies into enemies, spark wars that would tear apart everything we've built. Riley felt the weight of revelation settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. You're saying I'm some kind of supernatural treaty maker? You're saying she's a weapon, Caden corrected, his voice dangerous. I'm saying she's the key to everything, Jackson replied. And there are others who know about her bloodline now. Others who will come for her. What others? Caden demanded. Jackson hesitated, then pulled out another document. The vampire covens. The Fey courts. Even some of the witch circles. Word is spreading that the Silver Moon bloodline has resurfaced. They're all going to want her. To use her, Riley said bitterly. Just like you too. That's not, Jackson started. Isn't it? Riley slammed the journal shut. You rejected me when you thought I was broken. Now you discover I have some mystical bloodline and suddenly you want me back. And you, she turned to Caden, you marked me to unlock my power, but this explains why you really sought me out, doesn't it? It wasn't just about getting close to Jackson. It was about this. Caden's silence was answer enough. Riley stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The mate bond thrummed with Caden's guilt and Jackson's desperation, but she pushed both emotions away. She needed to think clearly. Tell me about my parents, she said without turning around. The real story. Jackson cleared his throat. According to the documents, your mother Madeline was the last alpha of the Silver Moon Pack. When the pack disbanded, she went into hiding, took a new identity. She met your father, Ethan Ashwood, and they settled in Moonridge territory. Why Moonridge? Because my grandfather offered them protection. He knew what Madeline was, knew the power she carried. He thought having the Silver Moon bloodline in his pack would give Moonridge an advantage. But something went wrong, Caden said, his voice flat. Jackson nodded. My father found out about Madeline's true identity when you were born. Your birth triggered something, awakened abilities in your mother that she'd kept dormant for years. My father saw it as a threat. So he killed them, Riley said quietly. He ordered their deaths, yes. But it wasn't random violence. Jackson's voice was barely above a whisper. He was afraid that if other packs learned about your bloodline, they'd try to take you. Use you against Moonridge. Instead, he just eliminated the problem, Caden growled. He thought he was protecting the pack. He didn't know. Jackson trailed off. Didn't know what? Riley turned back to face them. He didn't know that Caden's family had figured out who you were. That they were planning to protect you. The room went deadly quiet. Riley felt Caden's shock through the mate bond, followed quickly by a rage so intense it made her stagger. My family died protecting her? Caden's voice was barely controlled. Jackson nodded miserably. Your father had been secretly working with mine to keep Riley safe. When my father decided to eliminate the threat, your father tried to stop him. That's why the Cross family was murdered, not over territorial disputes, but because they were protecting the Silver Moon bloodline. Caden was on his feet in an instant, his chair crashing backward. The air in the room crackled with alpha power as his control slipped. My parents, my sister, they died because of her? They died because they were good people who tried to do the right thing, Jackson said firmly. Don't blame Riley for that. But Riley could feel Caden's emotions through the bond, confusion, betrayal, and underneath it all, a love he didn't want to feel warring with a resentment he couldn't help. The mate mark on her neck burned as his turmoil crashed over her. I need air, she said, heading for the door. Riley, wait, both men said simultaneously. She paused in the doorway, looking back at them. Jackson with his desperate hope, Caden with his complex mix of love and pain. Both of them needing her for reasons that had nothing to do with who she actually was. I need time to process this, she said. All of it. Jackson, you can stay in the guest quarters while we figure out what this means. But I want one thing clear, I'm not a prize to be won or a weapon to be wielded. I'll decide what to do with this bloodline, and I'll decide who I want in my life. She left them staring after her, their voices rising in argument before she'd even reached the hallway. Riley made her way to the gardens behind the house, seeking solitude among the carefully tended flowers. The morning sun was warm on her face, but she felt cold inside. Everything she'd thought she knew about herself, about her parents, about her place in the supernatural world, had been turned upside down. She was the last of the Silver Moon pack. Her blood could unite the werewolf world or tear it apart. Her parents had died keeping her secret, and Caden's family had died trying to protect her. And now two of the most powerful alphas in the region were both claiming they needed her, wanted her, would protect her, but for how much of it was really about her, and how much was about what she represented? The mate bond hummed in the back of her mind, carrying echoes of Caden's emotional storm. He was fighting with himself, she realized. Part of him genuinely cared for her, but part of him couldn't help but see her as the reason his family was dead. A shadow fell across the garden path. Riley looked up to find Jackson approaching, his movements careful and non-threatening. May I? He asked, gesturing to the bench beside her. Riley nodded, not trusting her voice. They sat in silence for a moment, watching butterflies dance among the roses. Finally, Jackson spoke. I know you have no reason to trust me, he said. I know I hurt you, rejected you, made you feel worthless. But I need you to know, I've regretted it every day since you left. Why? Riley's voice was barely audible. What changed? You did. Or rather, your absence did. Jackson stared down at his hands. The pack felt empty without you. I felt empty. I started remembering all the times you tried to help, all the kindness you'd shown when I didn't deserve it. I realized I'd thrown away the best thing in my life because I was too proud to see what was right in front of me. And now you discover I'm some kind of supernatural royalty, and suddenly I'm worth fighting for? No. Jackson turned to face her fully. I'd already decided to come find you, to apologize and beg you to give me another chance. Discovering your bloodline just made it more urgent. Riley searched his face, looking for deception. The Jackson she'd known had been proud, sometimes cruel, often thoughtless. But the man sitting beside her seemed genuinely broken by regret. "It's too late," she said softly. "Too much has happened. I'm mated to Caden now. Mate bonds can be broken. Not these kinds. Not alpha bonds. Then I'll settle for your friendship. Your forgiveness." Jackson's voice was raw with emotion. "I just need you to know that I'm sorry, Riley. Sorrier than I've ever been about anything in my life." Before Riley could respond, another presence entered the garden. Caden approached with predatory grace, his expression unreadable but his emotions, jealousy, possessiveness, uncertainty, clear through the bond. "Am I interrupting?" he asked, though his tone suggested he didn't much care if he was. "We were just talking," Riley said. "About what?" "About the future," Jackson answered, rising to face the other alpha. "About what Riley wants, not what we need from her." "And what does Riley want?" Caden's eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Riley looked between the two men, Jackson with his newfound humility and desperate hope, Caden with his complex mix of love and resentment and need. Both of them powerful, both of them wanting her, both of them tied to her destiny in ways she was only beginning to understand. "I want the truth," she said finally. "About my parents, about my bloodline, about why everyone seems to think I'm the key to some supernatural prophecy. And I want time to decide what to do with that truth." "How much time?" Jackson asked. "As long as it takes." Riley stood, moving between them with newfound confidence. "Because like it or not, gentlemen, you're both stuck with me now. And I'm done being anyone's pawn." The Silver Moon bloodline might make her powerful, but Riley was beginning to realize that her real strength had always come from within. Now she just had to figure out how to use it. Chapter 6. Riley stared at the photograph in her trembling hands, her world tilting on its axis for the second time in as many days. "This can't be right," she whispered. Ethan Steele, Caden's beta, looked uncomfortable as he shifted in his chair across from her. They were in Caden's study, late afternoon sun streaming through the windows, but Riley felt like she was drowning in darkness. "I'm afraid it is," Ethan said gently. "We ran the background checks after Jackson's visit yesterday. Your adoptive father, Ethan Ashwood, wasn't just some random pack member who took you in. He was beta to Jackson's father. His most trusted advisor." The photograph showed two men standing together, both young and proud in their pack uniforms. One was unmistakably Ethan Ashwood, the man Riley had called father for 16 years. The other was Sebastian Cross, Jackson's father. The date on the back read, "New Beta Ceremony, 1995. Ethan Ashwood was ordered to take you in," Caden continued from where he leaned against his desk. His voice was carefully neutral, but Riley could feel his controlled anger through the mate bond. "Your adoption wasn't an act of kindness. It was an assignment." Riley set the photograph down with shaking hands. "He loved me. My parents loved me. They died protecting me." From a car accident that was meant to look random, Ethan Steele interrupted softly. But the brake lines had been cut. Someone found out Ethan Ashwood was harboring the Silver Moon heir, and they eliminated the threat. "Who?" The word came out as barely more than a whisper. "We don't know yet." "But Riley..." Caden pushed off from the desk, moving closer. "There's more. I can't." Riley stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "I can't handle any more revelations right now. My entire life has been a lie. Everyone I trusted, everyone I loved." Jackson knew. The words hit her like a physical blow. Riley spun around, certain she'd misheard. "What did you say?" "Jackson knew who you were." Caden's expression was grim. "We found correspondence between his father and yours. Sebastian Cross told his son about your true identity when Jackson turned 18. Riley's legs gave out. She sank into the nearest chair, her mind reeling. "He's known for 5 years?" 5 years, And he never said anything? According to the letters, he was ordered to keep you at arm's length. To reject any romantic advances, to make sure you never got close enough to trust him with secrets that could get you killed. The rejections, Riley breathed. All 7 times. Were his way of protecting you, Ethan's steel finished. Twisted as it was, he thought if he made you hate him, you'd be safer. Riley felt sick. Every cruel word, every public humiliation, every moment she'd felt worthless and broken, it had all been an act. Jackson had known exactly who she was and had chosen to hurt her rather than trust her with the truth. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice deadly quiet. "In the guest quarters," Caden said. "Riley, I know you're angry." "Angry?" Riley laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the walls. "I'm furious. The building shook. It was subtle at first, just a tremor that made the windows rattle. Then it happened again, stronger this time, accompanied by a sound that made Riley's blood freeze. Howls. Dozens of them, rising from the forest surrounding the house. Caden was moving before the sound faded, his phone already in his hand. "This is Alpha Cross. Report." Riley heard the tinny voice of whoever was on the other end, but couldn't make out the words. Caden's expression grew increasingly grim as he listened. "How many?" he snapped. A pause. "No, hold position. Do not engage until I give the order." He hung up and turned to Riley and Ethan. "We're under attack. Approximately 50 wolves approaching from the north and east. Unknown pack." "Morrison?" Ethan asked. "No. These aren't Morrison wolves." Caden's voice was flat. "The scouts say they're wearing crimson bands. Pack markings they don't recognize." Riley felt ice form in her veins. "Crimson Fawn." Both men stared at her. "You know this pack?" Caden demanded. "No, but..." Riley closed her eyes, trying to remember something that felt like a half-forgotten dream. "When I was little, my mother, my adoptive mother, used to have nightmares. She'd wake up screaming about wolves with red eyes and crimson markings. She said they were the hunters who never stopped, never gave up." "The Crimson Fawn Pack was disbanded 20 years ago," Ethan said. "They were rogues, mercenaries. They worked for whoever paid the most. Apparently they're back," Caden said grimly. "And they're here for Riley." Another howl rose from the forest, closer this time. Riley could hear the sounds of her new pack mobilizing, running feet, shouted orders, the metallic click of weapons being readied. "Get her to the safe room," Caden ordered Ethan. "No." Riley's voice was firm. "I'm not hiding while people fight for me." "Riley." "I said no, Caden. I'm done being protected. I'm done being kept in the dark." She moved toward the door. "If they want me, they're going to have to go through me." "You don't understand," Caden caught her arm. "These aren't just any mercenaries. The Crimson Fawn Pack was known for taking contracts that other rogues wouldn't touch. They're killers, Riley. Professional killers. Then it's a good thing I'm an alpha." Before Caden could argue further, the front door burst open. Jackson stumbled in, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, his clothes torn. "They're here," he gasped. "They hit the perimeter guards first. Took them out silently, efficiently." His eyes found Riley. "They're not here to negotiate. They're here to take you." "How many made it past the perimeter?" Caden demanded, his personal feelings about Jackson set aside in the face of immediate threat. "At least 20 that I saw. But there are more coming." Jackson wiped blood from his eyes. "They've been planning this for a while. They know your patrol routes, your defensive positions. Someone's been feeding them information." "A traitor," Ethan said grimly. "We'll deal with that later." Caden was already moving, pulling weapons from a hidden cabinet. "Right now we need to." The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Through the windows, Riley could see fires burning in the distance, the pack house's outer buildings. They cut the power, Jackson said. Standard siege tactics. A new sound reached them, breaking glass from somewhere deeper in the house. They were inside. Jackson, can you fight? Caden asked, tossing him a silver-bladed knife. Try to stop me. Good. Ethan, coordinate with the pack. I want every available wolf protecting the main house. Caden turned to Riley. You're staying close to me. Caden. This isn't up for debate. They moved as a unit through the house, following the sounds of combat. Riley could hear snarls and screams, the crash of furniture being destroyed, the wet sound of claws meeting flesh. Her wolf, Vera, was restless beneath her skin, demanding to be released. The power she discovered during the rogue attack 3 days ago thrummed through her veins, begging to be used. They reached the main living area to find chaos. Shadow Creek wolves were locked in combat with invaders whose eyes glowed an unnatural red in the emergency lighting. The attackers fought with a coordination that spoke of military training, moving as one unit despite being in individual battles. But what caught Riley's attention wasn't the fighting. It was the figure standing calmly in the center of the room, untouched by the violence around him. He was tall and lean, with silver hair and pale skin that seemed to glow in the red light. When he turned toward them, Riley saw eyes the color of fresh blood. Riley Moonstone, he said, his voice carrying easily over the sounds of battle. At last. Who are you? Caden demanded, moving protectively in front of Riley. I am Gage Nightshade, Alpha of the Crimson Fang Pack. His smile revealed teeth that had been filed to points. And I've come to collect what belongs to us. Nothing here belongs to you, Jackson snarled, moving to Riley's other side. Doesn't it? Gage's laugh was like breaking glass. Tell me, young Blackthorn, did you really think your father's secrets died with him? Did you think we didn't know about the little silver moon princess you've been hiding? Riley felt cold realization wash over her. You killed my adoptive parents. Such a clever girl. Yes, I ordered their deaths. Ethan Ashwood was getting careless, asking too many questions about your bloodline. He was going to expose you before we were ready. Ready for what? Caden's voice was deadly quiet. For the ritual, of course. Gage's eyes fixed on Riley with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The Silver Moon bloodline doesn't just create treaties, Alpha Cross. In the right hands, with the right ceremony, it can control every supernatural being within a 1,000-mile radius. Force them to obey, to serve, to die if necessary. The fighting around them seemed to slow as Gage's words sank in. Riley felt sick as she understood the implications. You want to turn me into a mind control device, she said. I want to use your gifts to unite all the supernatural communities under my leadership. Think of it, no more petty territorial disputes, no more wars between species. Just peace under one ruler. Peace through slavery, Jackson spat. Peace through order. Gage's smile widened. But first, we need to unlock the full extent of her abilities. And that requires, well, let's call it intensive training. Over my dead body, Caden growled. That can be arranged. Gage raised his hand, and the Crimson Fang wolves stopped fighting. They formed a circle around the room, trapping Riley and her defenders in the center. Riley counted at least 15 of them, all with those unnatural red eyes, all radiating a wrongness that made her wolf recoil. You have a choice, Riley, Gage continued conversationally. Come with us willingly, and your friends live. Resist, and watch them die slowly. Don't listen to him, Caden said urgently. We can fight our way out of this. Can you? Gage laughed. Look around, Alpha Cross. Your pack is outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting an enemy they don't understand. How many of them will die for your pride? As if to punctuate his words, a Shadow Creek wolf screamed from somewhere deeper in the house. Riley flinched at the sound. Stop this, she said. Just stop. What do you want me to do? Riley, no, Jackson caught her arm. You can't trust him. I can't watch people die for me either. How noble, Gage purred. But I'm afraid it's too late for noble gestures. You see, we've been manipulating this situation for months. Every move you've made, every decision, has been part of our plan. What are you talking about? Caden demanded. The rogue attacks that drove Riley into neutral territory. The convenient appearance of Alpha Cross at just the right moment. Even young Blackthorn's sudden appearance here with revelations about her bloodline. Gage's smile was triumphant. All orchestrated to bring her to this point, to awaken her powers and gather her potential mates in one place. Riley felt the world shift beneath her feet. You're saying none of it was real? Oh, the emotions are real enough. The mate bond, the romantic tension, the conflicted loyalties, all genuine. But the circumstances that created them? Those were carefully crafted. You're lying, Caden snarled. Am I? Tell me, Alpha Cross, how did you know exactly where to find Riley in neutral territory? How did you know she would be there at precisely the right moment? Caden's silence was damning. And you, Jackson Crossfield, Gage continued. How convenient that your father's effects were suddenly discovered just in time to reveal Riley's true heritage. Almost as if someone wanted you to know. Jackson's face had gone pale. That's impossible. The security on my father's safe can be bypassed by someone with the right resources and motivation. Gage's enjoyment of their shock was evident. We've been planning this for years, children. Every contingency, every possible outcome, all leading to this moment. Riley felt betrayal crash over her in waves. Everything, her meeting with Caden, the mate bond, Jackson's revelations, all of it had been manipulated. She was nothing more than a pawn in a game she hadn't even known she was playing. Now, Gage said, his voice taking on a commanding tone. Enough talk. Riley, you will come with us. Your friends will surrender. And we can all avoid unnecessary bloodshed. No. The word came out stronger than Riley felt. She stepped forward, moving out from behind Caden's protective stance. I said no. I'm done being manipulated. I'm done being used by everyone around me. Power began to flow through her, making the air crackle with energy. You want the Silver Moon bloodline? Come and take it. Her transformation was explosive. Silver light erupted from her skin as she shifted, but this wasn't the same wolf form she'd taken before. This was something new, something that made even the Crimson Fawn wolf step back in alarm. Riley's wolf was massive, easily twice the size of any normal wolf. Her fur gleamed like liquid moonlight, and her eyes blazed with silver fire. When she snarled, the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. But more than her size or appearance, it was the power radiating from her that made everyone in the room freeze. This wasn't just an alpha, this was something primal, something that spoke to the deepest instincts of every supernatural being present. Impossible, Gage breathed. She's manifesting the original Silver Moon form. That bloodline was supposed to be diluted, weakened. Riley's wolf turned toward him, and when she spoke, her voice echoed with the authority of every alpha who had come before her. You underestimated what happens when you back a cornered animal into a corner, she said, her words carrying supernatural weight. You wanted to control me? Let me show you what real control looks like. The Silver Moon power erupted outward like a shockwave. Every wolf in the room, Crimson Fawn, Shadow Creek, it didn't matter, suddenly found themselves compelled to shift to human form and drop to their knees. Everyone except Caden and Jackson, who stood frozen but upright, protected by their alpha bonds with her. Gage struggled against the compulsion, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. This is impossible. You're untrained, undisciplined. I'm angry, Riley corrected, her massive wolf form padding closer to him. And I'm done playing games. She was preparing to end Gage permanently when movement caught her eye. One of the Crimson Fawn wolves, younger than the others, with fear rather than madness in his red eyes, had broken free of her compulsion somehow. He was reaching for a weapon, aiming not at her but at Jackson. Riley saw the silver blade gleaming in the emergency lighting, saw the trajectory that would take it straight through Jackson's heart. Time seemed to slow as she made her choice. She could save him. Her power was strong enough to stop the blade, to protect the man who had rejected her 7 times but had spent years secretly trying to keep her safe. Or she could let it happen. Let Jackson pay the price for all the lies, all the manipulation, all the pain he'd caused her. The blade was already in motion. She had seconds to decide. Riley chose mercy. Silver light exploded from her, intercepting the thrown knife and turning it to ash. But the effort of controlling so much power while maintaining the compulsion on the other wolves was enormous. She felt something tear inside her, and blood began to flow from her nose and ears. The distraction was all Gage needed. With a roar of rage, he broke free of her control and lunged, not at Riley but at Jackson, claws extended and death in his eyes. No! Riley threw herself between them, taking Gage's claws across her ribs instead of letting them find Jackson's throat. The silver claws, designed to kill even an alpha, tore through her flesh like paper. Riley collapsed, her wolf form flickering as her strength failed. But her sacrifice had given Caden the opening he needed. With a roar of pure fury, he shifted and tore Gage's throat out before the Crimson Fang Alpha could strike again. The remaining Crimson Fang wolves, leaderless and confused, scattered into the night. Riley lay on the floor, bleeding silver onto the expensive hardwood, looking up at 2 faces filled with anguish. Jackson had dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her wounds as if he could heal them through will alone. "Why?" he whispered, his voice broken. "After everything I did to you, why did you save me?" Riley's vision was growing dim, but she managed a small smile. "Because despite everything, despite all the lies and manipulation, I know you were trying to protect me. Even if you did it wrong." "Riley, stay awake," Caden commanded, his alpha voice trying to hold her to consciousness. "The healers are coming. You're going to be fine." "Am I?" Riley asked weakly. "Because I'm pretty sure Gage's claws were poisoned." The looks on their faces confirmed her fears. As darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, Riley wondered if choosing to save Jackson had been worth dying for. She supposed she'd find out soon enough. Chapter 7. Riley drifted in and out of consciousness, her body fighting the poison coursing through her veins. She was vaguely aware of being moved, of urgent voices around her, of hands pressing against her wounds. But what cut through the haze more than anything was the anguish pouring through her mate bond with Caden. He blamed himself. She could feel it like a physical weight, his guilt, his rage, his desperate fear that he was going to lose her. The emotions were so intense they actually helped anchor her to consciousness. "The silver poisoning is too advanced," Dr. Cassidy was saying from somewhere above her. "I've neutralized what I can, but without knowing the specific compound." "Then we find out what it was," Caden's voice, sharp with command and barely controlled panic. "Gage is dead," Jackson's voice, closer than she expected. "We can't exactly interrogate him." "No, but we can interrogate the ones who got away." "Caden." Ethan Steele's voice, calm and steady as always. The pack needs their Riley alive," Caden snarled. "Everything else is secondary." Riley tried to open her eyes, tried to speak, but her body wouldn't obey. The poison was like ice in her veins, slowing everything down, pulling her deeper into darkness. But through the mate bond, she felt Caden's hand take hers. His touch was warm, real, an anchor in the growing void. "Fight," he whispered, his lips close to her ear. "Please, Riley. Fight." Time became fluid. Riley couldn't tell if she'd been unconscious for minutes or hours when she next surfaced. The first thing she noticed was that the quality of light had changed, no longer the harsh emergency lighting, but the soft glow of candles. The second thing she noticed was the voice speaking nearby. A woman's voice, cultured and familiar in a way that made Riley's blood freeze. "She's stronger than I expected," the voice was saying. "The poisoning should have killed her by now." Maybe because she's not as weak as you thought, Jackson replied, his tone carefully neutral. Riley kept her eyes closed, instinctively knowing that pretending to be unconscious was her best chance to gather information. Through barely cracked eyelids, she could see she was in what looked like the pack's medical facility. Jackson sat beside her bed, but he wasn't alone. A woman stood near the window, her back to Riley. She was tall and elegant, with silver hair that caught the candlelight. When she turned, Riley's heart nearly stopped. The woman looked exactly like her mother. Or rather, exactly like Madeline Silverborn would have looked if she'd lived to be 50. "You're staring," the woman said to Jackson with amusement. "I know the resemblance is striking. Madeline was my baby sister, after all." "Madeline Graves," Jackson said, and Riley heard the tension in his voice. "You're supposed to be dead." Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. Madeline's smile was cold. "Though I did go to great lengths to make it convincing. Amazing what you can accomplish when everyone believes you don't exist." Riley's mind reeled. This was her aunt. Her mother's sister. The woman who, according to everything she'd been told, had died in the same attack that scattered the Silver Moon pack. "What do you want?" Jackson asked. "The same thing I've always wanted. To restore the Silver Moon pack to its rightful place as the supreme authority over all supernatural beings." Madeline moved closer to Riley's bed, and it took all of Riley's self-control not to flinch. "My dear niece is the key to that. Her blood, specifically." "Her blood?" "The Silver Moon bloodline isn't just about creating treaties, young Blackthorn. In its purest form, with the right ritual, it can command absolute obedience from any supernatural being. My sister was too weak to use that power, too concerned with ethics and morality." "But Riley..." Madeline's hand hovered over Riley's forehead. "Riley has been shaped by suffering, by betrayal, by the kind of pain that burns away hesitation. You orchestrated all of it," Jackson said slowly. "The attacks on her parents, the rejections, everything. Of course I did. Pain awakens power, Jackson. I needed Riley strong enough to survive the ritual, angry enough to want revenge, and isolated enough to trust the wrong people. Like Caden." Madeline laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Oh, Caden was never the wrong person to trust. He's exactly what I needed him to be, a powerful alpha whose mate bond would unlock Riley's dormant abilities. The timing had to be perfect, you see. Too early, and she wouldn't have been strong enough. Too late, and she might have learned to control her power. So you manipulated him too." "I manipulated everyone." "Did you really think it was coincidence that Ethan Steele became Caden's beta? That he was always there to offer advice, to guide decisions, to ensure things developed exactly as I needed them to?" Riley's blood turned to ice. "Ethan. Caden's most trusted advisor, his closest friend. The man who'd been by his side for 15 years. Ethan is your spy," Jackson said, understanding dawning in his voice. "Ethan is my son," Madeline corrected. "My eldest child, placed in Shadow Creek Pack when he was barely 20. He's been very useful over the years." The betrayal hit Riley like a physical blow. Ethan, who'd welcomed her warmly to the pack. Who'd given her advice about navigating her new role. Who'd warned her about getting too close to Caden, not out of concern for the revenge plan, but to keep her isolated and vulnerable. "Where is he now?" Jackson asked. "Ensuring that Alpha Cross is indisposed. The mate bond makes Riley difficult to control while he's conscious and fighting for her. But Ethan has been adding a little something to Caden's food for weeks now. Nothing fatal, just something to weaken his wolf, make him more susceptible to influence. Poison." Madeline had been poisoning Caden slowly, systematically, through the person he trusted most. Riley wanted to scream, wanted to tear Madeline apart with her bare hands, but she forced herself to remain still. "You're insane," Jackson said flatly. "I'm ambitious. There's a difference." Madeline moved away from the bed, pacing to the window. "For too long, the supernatural world has been fractured, chaotic. Vampires fighting werewolves, fae playing their games, witches hoarding their secrets. We could accomplish so much more working together. Under your control. Under proper leadership. My leadership. Madeline's voice grew passionate. Imagine it, Jackson. No more territorial disputes. No more species wars. Just order, progress, evolution. Slavery. Structure. Madeline's tone sharpened. And speaking of structure, you have a choice to make. You can help me complete the ritual willingly, or I can have Ethan kill Caden and take Riley by force. Either way, the outcome is the same. What makes you think I'd help you? Because despite everything, you care about her. And because you know that if you cooperate, I might let both her and Caden live after the ritual is complete. Might? The Silver Moon ritual requires a sacrifice. Traditional, it would be Riley herself. Her death would release all that stored power for me to claim. But I found a way to modify the process. Instead of killing her, I can drain most of her power while leaving her alive. Diminished, but breathing. And the sacrifice? Madeline's smile was predatory. One of her mates will do nicely. The mate bond contains tremendous power. Severing it violently releases energy that can fuel the ritual. Riley's heart clenched. Madeline was planning to kill either Caden or Jackson, not just for their power, but to break Riley emotionally. To ensure she was too devastated to fight back effectively. You have until dawn to decide, Madeline continued. Help me, and I'll make it quick for whichever one you choose. Refuse, and I'll make sure they both suffer before they die. Madeline headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Jackson? In case you're thinking of playing hero, my son has been very thorough. Caden is currently locked in his own safe room, too weak from the poison to break free. Most of his pack believes he's in there recovering from the battle. By the time anyone realizes something is wrong, it will be far too late. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Jackson alone with Riley. For a long moment, he sat in silence, his head in his hands. I know you're awake, he said finally. Riley opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. How long have you known? Your breathing changed when she mentioned Ethan. Your wolf may be dormant from the poison, but your human reactions are still there. Jackson leaned forward, his voice urgent. Riley, we have to get out of here. We have to warn Caden. I can barely move, Riley said, testing her limbs. The poison had weakened her significantly, though not as much as Madeline seemed to think. And you heard her, Ethan has him locked up somewhere. Then we find him. We break him out. With what army? Madeline said most of the pack thinks Caden is recovering. That means Ethan has control of Shadow Creek's forces. Jackson was quiet for a moment, then, not all of them. There are wolves loyal to Caden personally, not just to the pack structure. If we can reach them. How? I can barely stand, and you don't exactly have allies here. I have one. Jackson stood, moving to the medical supply cabinet. Dr. Cassidy isn't pack. She's a contract healer, brought in specifically to treat you. She has no loyalty to Ethan. As if summoned by her name, Dr. Cassidy appeared in the doorway. She was a small woman with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes that immediately assessed the situation. How much did you hear? Jackson asked. Enough to know that Ethan Steele isn't who I thought he was, she replied grimly. I've been wondering why he kept insisting on administering Alpha Cross's medication personally. Now I know. Can you help us? Riley asked. Dr. Cassidy moved to Riley's bedside, checking her pulse and the bandages over her wounds. The poison in your system is complex, but not fatal if treated properly. I can give you something to counteract the worst effects, but you'll still be weakened. How weakened? You won't be shifting anytime soon. And your Silver Moon abilities are completely suppressed until the toxin clears your system. Riley nodded. She'd expected as much. What about Caden? If Ethan has been poisoning him slowly, the effects would be cumulative. Weakness, confusion, suppressed wolf abilities. But unlike yours, his poisoning has been going on for weeks. Even if we stop it now, he might not recover fully, Riley finished. Not without the antidote. And I'm guessing Madeline isn't going to share that formula. Jackson paced to the window, looking out at the pack grounds. There's something else. Madeline said the ritual requires a sacrifice, one of Riley's mates. But Riley isn't mated to me. No, but you've been in love with her for years, Dr. Cassidy said matter-of-factly. Sometimes emotional bonds can be as strong as mystical ones, especially where the Silver Moon bloodline is concerned. So Madeline can use either of you, Riley said slowly. Which means she has backup plans. Even if we save Caden, she can still complete the ritual with Jackson. Unless we stop her first. How? She has Ethan controlling the pack, she has Caden imprisoned, and she's had years to plan this. We have, what? A few hours and whatever allies we can scrape together? Dr. Cassidy spoke up quietly. You have more than you think. Madeline may have planned for many contingencies, but she made one crucial mistake. Which is? She assumed that Ethan's loyalty to her was absolute. But I'd been watching him for weeks, ever since the inconsistencies in his behavior started bothering me. He's conflicted, Riley. Torn between the mother who raised him and the alpha who's become his friend. You think he might turn against her? I think he's already starting to question her methods. The way he looked when he brought Caden's medication tonight, that wasn't the expression of a man comfortable with what he was doing. Hope flickered in Riley's chest. So we turn him. Convince him to help us instead of her. It's risky, Jackson warned. If we're wrong, if his loyalty to Madeline is stronger than we think, then we're dead anyway, Riley finished. At least this way, we have a chance. Dr. Cassidy moved to her medicine cabinet, pulling out several vials. I'm going to give you something for the poison, and a stimulant that should help with the weakness. But Riley, whatever you're planning, you need to be careful. Your body has been through tremendous trauma. Push too hard, and you could cause permanent damage. Noted. Riley accepted the offered medications, downing them quickly despite their bitter taste. How long until they take effect? 20 minutes for the stimulant, longer for the poison antidote. Then we wait. Riley looked between Jackson and Dr. Cassidy. And we plan. Because when dawn comes, Madeline is going to discover that the Silver Moon bloodline is more trouble than she bargained for. As they huddled together, planning their desperate gambit, none of them noticed the shadow that passed by the window. Or the way it paused, as if listening, before disappearing into the night. Ethan Steele stood in the darkness outside the medical facility, his hand pressed against the wall, his heart heavy with the weight of choices that had seemed so clear 20 years ago. He'd been young when his mother had recruited him, angry at a world that had taken his father and left his family struggling to survive. Madeline's vision of a united supernatural world had seemed like the answer to everything. But 20 years of watching Caden Blackthorne, of seeing the man's honor, his loyalty to his pack, his genuine care for those under his protection, had changed Ethan. The alpha he'd been sent to spy on had become the best friend he'd ever had. And now Madeline wanted him to help kill that friend for the sake of power Ethan was no longer sure he wanted. The choice before him was simple in its complexity: betray the mother who'd raised him, or betray the man who'd become a brother. Either way, someone he loved was going to die. Ethan Steele disappeared into the shadows, knowing that dawn would bring consequences none of them were prepared for. Chapter 8. The stimulant Dr. Cassidy had given Riley was working faster than expected. Within 15 minutes, she could feel strength returning to her limbs, though the poison's effect still made her movements sluggish and uncoordinated. More concerning was the growing distress she felt through her mate bond with Caden. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He's in pain, Riley said suddenly, pressing a hand to her chest where the bond anchored itself. The connection that had been a source of comfort was now transmitting waves of confusion and rage. The poison, it's affecting him differently than Madeline said. Jackson looked up from where he'd been studying the pack house blueprints Dr. Cassidy had provided. What do you mean? She said it would make him weak, docile. But what I'm feeling through the bond. Riley closed her eyes, trying to parse the chaotic emotions flooding their connection. He's furious. And scared. And he can't tell what's real anymore. Dr. Cassidy frowned, checking her notes. If Ethan has been using a different compound than what Madeline intended, some wolf suppressants can cause paranoia and aggression instead of sedation, especially in alpha-level wolves. We need to get to him now, Riley said, struggling to her feet. The room spun, but she forced herself to stay upright. Before he does something that can't be undone. Riley, you're still too weak, Jackson started. A roar of pure rage echoed from somewhere deep in the pack house, so loud and full of fury that the windows rattled. It was followed by the sound of something heavy crashing through walls. That's Caden, Riley said, her heart clenching. Through the bond, she could feel his wolf fighting for control, his human mind fracturing under the influence of whatever Ethan had been feeding him. He's broken out. They ran through the corridors of the pack house, following the sounds of destruction. Riley had to lean on Jackson for support, her body still not responding properly, but the desperation to reach Caden drove her forward. They found him in the main hall, and Riley's heart broke at the sight. Caden stood in the center of the room in his partial shift, not fully wolf, but not human either. His claws were extended, his teeth elongated, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural light that spoke of a mind no longer entirely his own. The expensive furniture around him was in ruins, and deep gouges in the walls showed where his claws had raked stone. Ethan stood near the far wall, his face a mask of anguish. Caden, please. You need to calm down. Let me help. Help? Caden's voice was barely recognizable, more growl than words. You've been poisoning me for weeks. Lying to my face while you slowly drove me insane. I never wanted it to go this far, Ethan said desperately. The compound was supposed to be mild, just enough to make you more suggestible. But something went wrong. Everything went wrong. Caden roared, lunging forward. Ethan barely managed to dodge the claws that would have taken his head off. Caden. Riley called out, stepping into the room despite Jackson's attempt to hold her back. Caden spun toward her voice, and when his eyes found her, the madness in them flickered with recognition. For a moment, she thought the bond between them might be enough to bring him back. Then his gaze shifted to Jackson beside her, and the madness returned tenfold. You, Caden snarled, his attention fixing on Jackson with terrifying intensity. You're here. In my house. With my mate. Caden, it's not what you think, Riley started. Isn't it? Caden's laugh was broken, bitter. The poison clears my mind just enough to see the truth. You chose him, didn't you? When Gage attacked, you saved him instead of protecting yourself. You've been choosing him all along. That's not true. Then why is he still here? Caden began stalking toward them, and Riley could see the predator in every line of his body. Why haven't you sent him away? Why do I feel your emotions shift every time you look at him? Riley's breath caught. The mate bond went both ways. If she could feel Caden's emotions, he could feel hers. And despite everything, despite the lies and manipulation, she did still have feelings for Jackson. Complicated, painful feelings that she'd been trying to suppress. I can smell him on you, Caden continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than his roars. His scent, mixed with yours. How long, Riley? How long have you been planning to leave me for him? Caden, you're not thinking clearly, Jackson said, stepping protectively in front of Riley. The poison is affecting your judgment. Don't. Caden's eyes flashed. Don't you dare talk to me about judgment. You rejected her 7 times, and now you think you can just take her back. I'm trying to protect her. From what? From me? Caden's claws extended further. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am the threat here. Riley felt the shift in his emotions through the bond, the moment when hurt and confusion crystallized into cold, murderous intent. He was going to kill Jackson, and in his poisoned state, nothing she said would stop him. Caden, please, she tried one more time. But he was already moving, faster than should have been possible even for an alpha. Jackson tried to dodge, but he was still human, still limited by normal reflexes. Caden's claws caught him across the chest, sending him crashing into the wall with a sickening crack. Blood bloomed across Jackson's shirt as he slumped to the floor, gasping. No! Riley threw herself between them as Caden advanced for the killing blow. Stop. If you hurt him, you'll hate yourself when the poison clears. Will I? Caden's claws hovered inches from her throat. Or will I finally be free of the competition? Riley looked into his eyes and saw almost nothing of the man she'd fallen in love with. The poison had stripped away his control, his compassion, leaving only the most primal instincts. Possessiveness. Jealousy. The need to eliminate threats to his mate. She had one choice. One terrible, heartbreaking choice. I reject you, she whispered. The words hung in the air like a curse. Caden's eyes widened in shock, the predatory focus suddenly replaced by confusion. What? I, Riley Moonstone, reject you, Caden Blackthorn, as my mate. Each word felt like tearing out a piece of her soul. I sever the bond between us. I release you from any claim to me. The effect was immediate and devastating. The mate bond, which had been a constant presence in Riley's mind for days, simply stopped. The connection that had allowed her to feel Caden's emotions, that had shared their strength and power, vanished like it had never existed. Riley collapsed to her knees as the loss hit her. It felt like losing a limb, like having part of her heart carved out with a rusty knife. The silver moon power that had been amplified by their bond flickered and died, leaving her feeling smaller, weaker, more alone than she'd ever been. Caden staggered backward, his own face reflecting the same devastating loss. The poison madness cleared from his eyes, replaced by horror as he realized what had just happened. Riley, no, he breathed. What have you done? What I had to do, Riley said, her voice barely audible. To save his life. To save you from becoming a murderer. But the bond, it can't be restored once it's rejected. You know that, right? We can never. I know. Riley forced herself to look at him, memorizing his face one last time. I know what I've given up. Caden dropped to his knees beside her, reaching out as if to touch her face, then stopping when he realized he no longer had that right. The poison made me crazy. I wasn't thinking clearly. It doesn't matter, Riley said firmly. What matters is that Jackson is alive. What matters is that you're not a killer. Behind them, Jackson struggled to sit up, one hand pressed to his bleeding chest. Riley, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. Riley's voice was getting stronger, even as her power continued to ebb. And now we have bigger problems. Without the mate bond, I'm defenseless. Madeline will know what I've done within minutes. As if summoned by her words, slow applause echoed from the doorway. Madeline Graves stepped into the room, flanked by several crimson fawn wolves. Her smile was triumphant. How beautifully dramatic, she said. Though I must admit, I didn't expect you to make it quite so easy for me. You knew this would happen, Riley accused. You knew the poison would drive him to this. I hoped it would. Ethan was supposed to use a milder compound, but I may have adjusted his supplies. Nothing like a little jealous rage to force impossible choices. Madeline's eyes glittered with satisfaction. And what a choice you made. Rejecting your mate to save your first love. It's almost poetic. What do you want? Caden demanded, struggling to his feet. Without the mate bond to anchor him, the remaining poison in his system was hitting him harder. What I've always wanted. Riley's cooperation in the ritual. Madeline gestured, and her wolves moved to surround them. But first, a little insurance. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face pale but determined. He was carrying what looked like a modified tranquilizer gun, loaded with darts that glowed with an eerie blue light. I'm sorry, he said, though it wasn't clear who he was apologizing to. But my mother is right about one thing. The supernatural world needs unification. Too many have died in the endless wars. This isn't unification, Jackson said, still bleeding but managing to stand. This is conquest. Sometimes they're the same thing, Madeline said. Ethan, if you please. Ethan raised the gun, his hands shaking slightly. Riley saw his internal struggle, the war between duty to his mother and loyalty to his alpha. For a moment, she thought he might refuse. Then his expression hardened, and he pulled the trigger. The dart hit Riley in the shoulder, and immediately she felt a new kind of poison flooding her system. Not the silver toxin from Gage's claws, but something that felt like liquid exhaustion. Her legs gave out, and darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. A mild paralytic, Madeline explained conversationally as Riley collapsed. You'll be conscious but unable to move for several hours. Perfect for transport. Where are you taking her? Caden demanded, trying to reach Riley but stopped by the Crimson Fawn wolves. Somewhere safe, where she can prepare for the ritual. Madeline knelt beside Riley's prone form. Did you know, dear niece, that the blood moon is in 3 days? Perfect timing, really. Blood moons amplify silver moon power, making the ritual much more effective. Riley tried to speak, tried to move, but her body no longer obeyed her commands. She could only watch helplessly as Madeline's wolves lifted her. The beautiful part, Madeline continued, is that the ritual requires willing participation. Oh, not willing in the sense that you want to die, that would be too much to ask. But willing in the sense that you choose to sacrifice yourself for a greater good. She'll never agree to that, Jackson said fiercely. Won't she? Madeline's smile was cold. When the alternative is watching everyone she cares about die slowly? When I start with the youngest members of both packs and work my way up? I think you'll find Riley has a very strong protective instinct. As they carried her toward the door, Riley managed to catch Ethan's eye. He was staying behind, she realized, maintaining his cover as Caden's loyal beta. But there was something in his expression, regret, determination, and what might have been a message. With tremendous effort, Riley forced herself to speak, her voice barely a whisper that only supernatural hearing could catch. Blood moon, she breathed, hoping Ethan would understand. 3 days. Tell them. Ethan's eyes widened slightly, and he gave an almost imperceptible nod. What did she say? Madeline demanded. Nothing coherent, Ethan lied smoothly. The paralytic affects speech first. Madeline studied him for a moment, then shrugged. No matter. We have what we came for. As they carried Riley out into the night, she caught a last glimpse of Caden and Jackson standing together in the ruined hall. The two men who had both loved her, now united by loss and the desperate need to save her. The irony wasn't lost on her. It had taken her rejection, her capture, and the threat of her death to finally bring the Shadow Creek and Moonridge packs together. She just hoped it would be enough. As unconsciousness finally claimed her, Riley's last thought was a prayer to whatever powers might be listening, let them find her before the blood moon rose. Because once Madeline had what she wanted, Riley suspected that death would be a mercy compared to what would come after. The ritual would make Madeline the supreme alpha of all supernatural beings. And with that kind of power, the world would never be free again. 3 days. That's all the time left to stop an apocalypse that Riley herself had inadvertently set in motion. The countdown to the blood moon had begun. Chapter 9. Riley woke to the sound of chanting. Her body was still paralyzed from Ethan's dart, but her mind was clear, and what she saw when she forced her eyes open made her blood freeze. She was lying on a stone altar in what appeared to be an ancient cave, surrounded by dozens of candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. The air smelled of incense, old blood, and something else, something that made her wolf recoil in instinctive terror. Dark magic. The kind that had been forbidden for centuries. Madeline stood at the head of the altar, dressed in ceremonial robes that had probably been white once but were now stained with rusty brown patches. In her hands, she held an ornate silver dagger that seemed to drink in the candlelight rather than reflect it. Around the cave, arranged in a perfect circle, stood nearly 30 wolves. But these weren't the crimson fawn wolves Riley had seen before. These were different, older, more primal, with eyes that held an intelligence that was definitely not human. "Ah, you're awake," Madeline said without looking down. "Perfect timing. I was just explaining to my ancestors how we're going to restore the Silver Moon Pack to its rightful glory." "Ancestors?" Riley managed to whisper, though speaking took tremendous effort. "The original Silver Moon Alphas. The ones who created the bloodline binding rituals in the first place." Madeline's smile was radiating madness. "It took me 20 years to figure out how to call them back from the spirit realm, but they're quite eager to see their legacy restored." Riley's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she realized with horror that the wolves around her weren't entirely solid. She could see through them in places, and when they moved, it was with the fluid grace of beings no longer bound by physical laws. Ghosts. Madeline had summoned the ghosts of dead alphas to witness her ritual. "The blood moon rises in 2 hours," Madeline continued, raising the dagger to catch the candlelight. "And then, my dear niece, you'll help me become something this world has never seen, an alpha with the power to command every supernatural being in existence." "I'll never help you," Riley said, putting as much strength as she could into her voice. "Oh, but you will. Because helping me is the only way to save the people you love." Madeline gestured, and images began to appear in the smoke rising from the incense. Riley saw Shadow Creek territory, saw Moonridge lands, both under attack by creatures she didn't recognize. "My followers are currently visiting both packs. They have orders to kill one person every hour until the ritual is complete. Starting with the youngest." Riley's heart clenched as she saw a child, couldn't be more than 10, cowering in what looked like the Shadow Creek school building while something with red eyes stalked through the hallways. "You're a monster," Riley breathed. "I'm a visionary. There's a difference." Madeline set the dagger down and began arranging other items on a smaller altar nearby, bowls, vials of various liquids, and what looked suspiciously like more human remains. "But I wasn't always. Once upon a time, I believed in your mother's naive ideals about cooperation and harmony. My mother was a good person. Your mother was a fool who got our entire pack killed because she couldn't make the hard choices." Madeline's voice hardened. "Do you want to know what really happened that night? The night our parents died?" Despite herself, Riley found herself listening. "Madeline, your mother, had discovered that someone was hunting Silver Moon descendants. Killing them one by one, trying to wipe out our bloodline completely. She wanted to go into hiding, to scatter what was left of our pack to the winds." Madeline began mixing substances in one of the bowls, and the smell that arose made Riley's eyes water. "I wanted to fight back. To use our power to crush whoever was threatening us. So you betrayed her. So I made a deal." Madeline's hands stilled. "I contacted Sebastian Cross and told him where to find Madeline and Ethan. In exchange, he promised to protect me and help me rebuild the Silver Moon Pack under my leadership." The confession hit Riley like a physical blow. Her aunt, her own blood, had sold out her parents for power. "But Sebastian double-crossed me," Madeline continued bitterly. "He killed Madeline and Ethan, but then he tried to kill me too. Apparently, he decided that no Silver Moon bloodline was safer than a controlled one. So you killed him in revenge." "Eventually. It took years of planning, but yes. I arranged for Sebastian's death, and I made sure it looked like an accident." Madeline's smile was cold. "But not before I'd learned everything he knew about suppressing Silver Moon abilities. Do you know how I kept you weak all these years, Riley?" Riley's blood turned to ice. "What?" "The tea your grandmother used to give you for your constitution. The vitamins the pack doctor insisted you take. Even the shampoo your adoptive parents bought, all of it laced with compounds designed to keep your wolf dormant." Madeline laughed at Riley's horrified expression. "I've been suppressing your power since you were a child, making sure you'd never be strong enough to challenge me when the time came." The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that Riley could barely process it. Everyone she'd trusted, everyone who'd claimed to love her, had been part of Madeline's plan. "Why tell me this now?" Riley asked. "Why not just get on with your ritual?" "Because the ritual requires understanding. You have to know exactly what you're sacrificing and why. The old magic is very particular about consent." Madeline picked up the dagger again. "But also because I want you to understand that this is your fault." "My fault?" "If you hadn't been so weak, so pathetically desperate for acceptance, none of this would have been necessary. If you just accepted your role as my successor, learned to use your power properly, I could have achieved my goals without all this unpleasantness." Madeline gestured to the ghost wolves, who had begun to pace restlessly around the altar. Their eyes were fixed on Riley with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "But instead, you fell in love. Twice. Like your mother, you let sentiment make you weak." Madeline's voice dripped with disgust. "So now we do this the hard way." "The hard way?" "The ritual I'm about to perform doesn't just transfer your power to me. It binds your soul to mine permanently. You'll become my eternal servant, conscious but unable to disobey any command I give you. Forever." Riley felt terror claw at her throat. Death would have been a mercy compared to what Madeline was describing. But as the fear threatened to overwhelm her, Riley noticed something Madeline apparently hadn't. During the 3 days of her captivity, while the paralytic had kept her body immobile, her mind had been anything but passive. The Silver Moon bloodline wasn't just about controlling other supernatural beings. It was about connection, about understanding the bonds that tied all living things together. And while Madeline had been preparing her ritual, Riley had been quietly reaching out through those bonds, making connections her aunt never could have imagined. She could feel them now, thin threads of psychic energy connecting her to every wolf Madeline had hurt over the years. Caden, slowly recovering from the poison but burning with rage and determination. Jackson, coordinating with Shadow Creek wolves despite their generations of enmity. Ethan, torn between loyalty and guilt but ultimately choosing to help rather than hinder the rescue efforts. Even the ghost wolves surrounding her weren't as aligned with Madeline as they appeared. Riley could sense their confusion, their growing realization that this wasn't the restoration of their legacy they'd been promised. "You made one mistake," Riley said quietly. Madeline paused in her preparations. "Oh? And what's that?" "You think the Silver Moon power is about domination. About forcing others to obey." Riley managed to turn her head slightly, meeting her aunt's eyes. "But it's not. It's about connection. About understanding. About bringing out the best in people, not the worst. Philosophy won't save you now, child. Won't it?" Riley smiled, and for the first time since waking up on the altar, she felt hope. "Tell me, Aunt Madeline, why do you think the paralytic is wearing off so quickly?" Madeline's eyes widened. She looked down at the darts she'd used, then back at Riley, who was now able to move her fingers and toes. "Because the people who love me are coming," Riley continued, her voice growing stronger. "And when someone you're connected to is in danger, when they need you desperately enough, physical limitations become negotiable." The sound of howls echoed from outside the cave. Not the mournful cries of the ghost wolves, but the fierce, triumphant calls of living packs united in purpose. Madeline spun toward the cave entrance, her face twisting with rage. "Impossible. My followers should have stopped them." "Your followers are fighting 3 packs working together for the first time in 50 years, Riley said, managing to push herself up on her elbows. "Shadow Creek, Moonridge, and even some of the Morrison wolves who decided they'd rather fight alongside their neighbors than watch the world burn." Through her psychic connections, Riley could feel the battle raging outside. It was fierce and bloody, but her people were winning. Madeline's forces, for all their dark magic and supernatural enhancements, couldn't stand against the combined might of wolves fighting for something they believed in. "No matter," Madeline snarled, raising the dagger high. "I don't need the full ritual. Your blood alone will give me enough power to." The dagger never completed its downward arc. Caden burst into the cave in his full wolf form, moving faster than anything should have been able to move. He hit Madeline mid-strike, sending her flying across the cave to crash against the far wall. Behind him came Jackson, also shifted, his wolf form slightly smaller than Caden's but no less deadly. And behind Jackson came Ethan, his face grim but determined. The ghost wolves suddenly materialized fully, no longer translucent but solid and snarling. They moved to defend Madeline, but Riley was ready for them. "Stop," she commanded, pouring every ounce of Silver Moon authority into her voice. The ghost wolves froze mid-charge. Their eyes, which had been fixed on the intruders, slowly turned to Riley. "You were called here under false pretenses," Riley told them, struggling to sit up fully as sensation returned to her legs. "This isn't about restoring the Silver Moon legacy. This is about perverting it." The largest of the ghost wolves, probably the original Silver Moon Alpha, padded closer to the altar. When he spoke, his voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere at once. "What would you have us do, last daughter of our line? Help me stop her. Help me restore the true purpose of our bloodline, protection, not conquest." The ghost Alpha looked between Riley and Madeline, who was struggling to her feet with blood running from her nose. His ancient eyes seemed to weigh generations of choices and consequences. "The girl speaks truth," he said finally. "This ritual, it is an abomination. A corruption of everything we built." "You don't understand," Madeline gasped, wiping blood from her mouth. "The supernatural world is fracturing. Without strong leadership, without unity." "Unity cannot be forced," the ghost Alpha interrupted. "It must be chosen. You have forgotten this truth." Madeline's face contorted with rage. "Then I'll complete the ritual without your help." She lunged for the dagger she'd dropped, but Jackson was faster. His wolf form intercepted her, and they went down in a snarling tangle of claws and teeth. Riley felt power flooding back into her system as the paralytic finally wore off completely. But more than that, she felt the connections she'd been building over the past 3 days crystallizing into something new. Not the dominating force Madeline had tried to create, but something far more powerful, a network of willing cooperation and mutual protection. Through her psychic links, she could feel every wolf in the battle outside. Could sense their fear, their determination, their growing hope as Madeline's forces began to retreat. And underneath it all, she felt something that made her heart soar, the mate bond with Caden, restored not through magic but through choice. Through his decision to risk everything to save her, and her decision to forgive the poison-induced madness that had driven them apart. "Caden," she called out, and his wolf form immediately turned toward her. Even in his shifted state, she could see the relief in his eyes at finding her alive. But their reunion would have to wait. Madeline had broken free from Jackson and was making one last desperate play. She'd retrieved the dagger and was advancing on Riley again, her eyes wild with madness. "If I can't have your cooperation," Madeline snarled, "I'll settle for your death. Your blood alone won't give me everything I want, but it will be enough to start with." She raised the dagger, and this time nothing stood between her and Riley. Except Riley herself. The Silver Moon power that had been building in her for 3 days suddenly exploded outward like a shockwave. Not the raw, uncontrolled force she'd manifested during the rogue attack, but something refined, focused, and absolutely devastating. Madeline's dagger turned to ash in her hands. The dark magic artifacts around the cave cracked and crumbled. Even the ghost wolf stepped back from the sheer intensity of Riley's power. "You want to see what the Silver Moon bloodline can really do?" Riley said, rising from the altar with power crackling around her like silver lightning. "Let me show you." She reached out through her psychic network, connecting not just with the wolves fighting outside but with every supernatural being within 100 miles. Vampires, fae, witches, even the wild spirits that lived in the deepest parts of the forest, all of them suddenly felt the call of the Silver Moon. But instead of compelling them to obey, Riley offered them something else. A choice. A chance to be part of something bigger than themselves, something built on cooperation rather than conquest. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Power flowed back to Riley through hundreds of willing connections, each one freely given, each one strengthening the whole. Madeline staggered backward, her face pale with shock. "That's impossible. No one can connect with that many beings at once." The strain alone should kill you. It would kill someone trying to dominate them, Riley agreed. But when they're offering their power freely, when they want to be part of the network, there's no strain at all. Only strength. Madeline made one last desperate attempt to flee, but the ghost wolves blocked her path. They had chosen their side, and it wasn't hers. Madeline Graves, the ghost Alpha intoned, for the crime of corrupting the Silver Moon legacy and betraying your own bloodline, we banish you from the spirit realm. You will find no rest among your ancestors. And for the crimes of murder, manipulation, and attempted genocide, Riley added, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, I strip you of your wolf. You are no longer part of any pack, any family, any supernatural community. You are nothing. The Silver Moon power flowed out of Riley one more time, but this was different. This wasn't about connection or cooperation. This was about severing bonds that should never have existed in the first place. Madeline's scream echoed through the cave as her wolf was torn away from her. She collapsed to her knees, suddenly looking older, smaller, utterly human. You can't, she whispered. You can't take away what I am. I can, and I have. Riley looked down at the broken woman who had caused so much pain. You'll live, but you'll live as what you chose to be, alone. The ghost wolves began to fade, their duty finally complete. But before they vanished entirely, the Alpha approached Riley one last time. You have restored honor to our line, he said. The Silver Moon Pack lives again, not in conquest but in unity. We are proud. Then they were gone, leaving Riley alone with Caden, Jackson, Ethan, and the defeated Madeline. Outside, the sounds of battle had faded. Through her connections, Riley could feel the aftermath, wounded wolves being tended, prisoners being secured, and a growing sense of possibility as 3 former enemy packs worked together to clean up the mess. Is it over? Jackson asked, shifting back to human form. It's over, Riley confirmed. Then she looked between him and Caden, both of whom were watching her with a mixture of awe and love. But I think it's also just the beginning. Because the network she'd created during the ritual, the willing connections between hundreds of supernatural beings, wasn't fading. If anything, it was growing stronger. For the first time in centuries, the supernatural world had a chance at real unity. Not through conquest or coercion, but through choice. And Riley Moonstone, last of the Silver Moon Alphas, would be there to guide them every step of the way. Chapter 10. The power coursing through Riley should have been impossible for any mortal being to contain. She stood in the center of the cave, silver light radiating from her skin in waves that made the very air shimmer. But even as the network of connections strengthened around her, even as hundreds of supernatural beings willingly shared their essence with her, Riley could feel something fundamental shifting inside her. This wasn't just about accessing her Silver Moon heritage anymore. This was something deeper, older, more primal than anything the bloodline had ever produced. Riley, Caden said urgently, his voice cutting through the rush of power in her mind. You need to stop. Your body can't handle this much energy. But Riley barely heard him. Because in the moment when she'd stripped Madeline of her wolf, when she'd absorbed all the stolen power her aunt had accumulated over 20 years of manipulation and murder, something had awakened. Memories that weren't hers flooded her consciousness. Images of a time before packs, before territories, before the endless wars that had defined the supernatural world for centuries. She saw herself, but not herself. A woman who looked exactly like her, standing on a moonlit plateau surrounded by the first wolves ever to take human form. The original Silver Moon Alpha. Not just a powerful leader, but something far more significant. The Alpha Goddess. The first spirit to bridge the gap between human and wolf, the divine being who had created the very concept of the pack bond. Impossible, Madeline whispered from where she knelt on the cave floor, her human eyes wide with disbelief. The goddess died millennia ago. Her spirit was supposed to have passed into legend. Not died, Riley said, but her voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Waiting. Sleeping. Until the need was great enough to justify awakening. The silver light around her intensified, and suddenly Riley could see the truth that had been hidden for generations. The Silver Moon Pack hadn't been destroyed by politics or territorial disputes. It had been deliberately scattered because they'd been the guardians of a secret too dangerous for any one group to control. They'd been protecting the dormant spirit of the Alpha Goddess, passing it down through their bloodline, waiting for the time when the supernatural world would need divine intervention to survive. That time was now. The stolen power, Riley said, turning toward Madeline with eyes that now blazed like stars. All those you killed, all those you manipulated, their essence is still trapped in the artifacts you used for the ritual. I can feel them. Madeline's face went pale. You can't. Even if you are what you claim to be, the binding spells are too complex. Not for me. Riley raised her hands, and the broken artifacts around the cave began to glow. One by one, wisps of silver light emerged from them, the stolen life force of Madeline's victims over the years. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all the wolves who had died to fuel her aunt's mad quest for power. I return what was taken, Riley declared, her voice echoing with divine authority. I restore what was stolen. I heal what was broken. The wisps of light swirled around her, and through her psychic network, Riley felt their gratitude, their relief, their joy at finally being free. One by one, they faded into peace, but not before each one added their strength to hers. The process should have killed her. The human body, even one with alpha wolf genetics, wasn't designed to channel that much spiritual energy. Riley felt herself beginning to burn out from the inside, her mortal form struggling to contain the divine essence awakening within her. She's dying, Jackson said urgently. The transformation is too much. Her body can't. He was right. Riley could feel her physical form starting to disintegrate, consumed by the very power that was supposed to heal the world. She was becoming pure spirit, pure energy, losing all connection to the mortal realm. But she couldn't stop. Not when she was so close to undoing generations of pain and hatred. Not when she finally had the power to create the unity her people desperately needed. Let me help, Caden said, stepping forward despite the dangerous energy crackling around her. No, Riley managed to say. If you touch me now, the power will burn you alive. Then I'll burn. His voice was calm, resolute. But I won't watch you disappear. Not again. Before Riley could stop him, Caden pressed his hand against her shoulder. The contact should have incinerated him instantly. Instead, something unexpected happened. The mate bond they shared, strengthened by their recent reunion, created a conduit for the excess energy. Caden's alpha strength, considerable in its own right, began absorbing some of the divine overflow, making it possible for Riley to maintain her mortal form. But even with Caden sharing the load, it wasn't enough. The goddess energy was too vast, too ancient, too powerful for even two alphas to contain. My turn, Jackson said quietly. Riley started to protest, but Jackson was already moving. He placed his hand on her other shoulder, and suddenly the load was divided 3 ways. It shouldn't have worked. Jackson wasn't her mate, wasn't connected to her through bonds of magic. But as the 3 of them stood together, Riley realized that some connections went deeper than mystical ceremonies or ancient rituals. Love. Not romantic love, though that was part of it, but the deeper kind of love that connected all living things. The love that had made Jackson spend years trying to protect her in his misguided way. The love that had driven Caden to risk everything to save her. The love that had made Riley choose mercy over vengeance, healing over hatred. That love became a bridge, allowing the 3 of them to share the burden of divine transformation. Together, Riley whispered, and suddenly she understood what the Alpha Goddess had been trying to show her. The supernatural world hadn't been fractured by political differences or territorial disputes. It had been broken by the loss of connection, the forgetting of the fundamental truth that all their peoples shared common origins, common needs, common dreams. But it could be healed. Not through conquest or coercion, but through the willing choice to stand together, to share burdens, to remember that strength came from unity. The silver light emanating from Riley began to change, becoming warmer, more welcoming. Instead of the overwhelming radiance of pure divinity, it became something approachable, something that invited rather than demanded. Through her psychic network, Riley felt the response from every supernatural being within reach. Not just wolves, but vampires and fae and witches and spirits. All of them sensing the possibility of something new, something better than the endless cycle of conflict that had defined their existence. One by one, they began to offer their own energy to the network. Not because they were compelled to, but because they wanted to be part of something larger than themselves. The cave filled with representatives of every supernatural community. They came not as conquerors or negotiators, but as witnesses to the birth of something unprecedented, a truly unified supernatural nation. Ethan was among them, his face wet with tears as he knelt before Riley. "Forgive me," he said. "I should have seen what she was doing. Should have stopped it sooner." "You did stop it," Riley said gently, the goddess energy finally settling into something manageable within her transformed consciousness. "When it mattered most, you chose correctly. That's all any of us can do." She looked around the cave, taking in the impossible sight of natural enemies standing peacefully together. Shadow Creek wolves next to Moonridge pack members. Morrison wolves sharing space with vampires and fae. Even some of Madeline's former followers, freed from her influence and eager to make amends. "The old ways are ending," Riley announced, her voice carrying to every being present and through the psychic network to thousands more. "The time of separate territories, of isolated packs, of species fighting species, that era dies here, tonight." "What comes next?" asked Gage Blackwood, the vampire ambassador from the gala, who had apparently arrived with reinforcements. "Something new," Riley replied. "A confederation of supernatural communities, united by choice rather than conquest. Territory boundaries dissolved, replaced by districts where all species can live and work together. Pack loyalty expanded to include not just wolves, but any being willing to contribute to the common good. The idea should have been met with resistance, with fear, with the knee-jerk territoriality that had driven centuries of conflict. Instead, Riley felt waves of excitement, hope, and possibility flowing through the network. People were tired of fighting. They wanted peace, prosperity, the chance to build something better for their children. Who will lead this confederation? The question came from Sarah, Caden's legal counsel, who had clearly been thinking about the practical implications. Riley looked at Caden and Jackson, both still supporting her through their physical connection. The three of them had become something new together, not just individuals, but a symbol of unity, of the possibility of transcending old hatreds. "We will," she said simply. "Caden as my mate and co-alpha. Jackson as beta and voice of the Moonridge integration. Myself as the bridge between all communities." "And what about love?" Jackson asked quietly, his voice meant only for her and Caden. "What about the choice you were supposed to make between us?" Riley smiled, feeling the last pieces of a cosmic puzzle clicking into place. "I realized I was asking the wrong question. It was never about choosing between you. It was about choosing to heal the wound that separated you in the first place." She gently extracted herself from their supportive touch, the divine energy now fully integrated into her being. The silver light faded to a warm glow that seemed to emanate from her skin itself, not overwhelming, but unmistakably present. "Jackson," she said, taking his hands. "I love you. I always have. But it's the love of deep friendship, of shared history, of two people who helped each other become who they were meant to be. Can that be enough?" Jackson was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he smiled, the first truly peaceful expression she'd ever seen from him. "It's everything," he said. "Being your friend, your beta, your partner in building this new world, that's more than I ever dared to hope for." Riley turned to Caden, who was watching her with an expression of wonder and love so intense it took her breath away. "And you," she said. "My mate, my anchor, my choice made freely and completely. Are you ready to help me change the world?" "I've been ready since the moment I found you by that creek," Caden replied, pulling her into his arms. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Their kiss was witnessed by representatives of every supernatural community, sealing not just their personal bond but the alliance between their peoples. 6 months later, Riley stood on the balcony of the new Confederation headquarters, watching the sun set over what had once been neutral territory. Below her, the first integrated supernatural city was taking shape, wolves and vampires working side by side on construction projects, Fey artists collaborating with witch engineers, children of all species playing together in parks that had been designed for multiple needs. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still individuals who resisted change, still problems that seemed impossible to solve. But they were trying, and that effort was making a difference. The Morrison Pack has agreed to join the Eastern District, Caden said, joining her on the balcony with a stack of reports. And the Pacific Coast vampires want to discuss trade agreements. Good, Riley said, then winced slightly as a sharp kick reminded her of the other change in her life. Caden's hand immediately went to her rounded belly, his touch gentle but protective. How are you feeling? Like I'm carrying the world's most active future alpha, Riley laughed. I swear this child is going to be born knowing how to shift. Given their parentage, that's probably not far from the truth. Riley leaned back against Caden's chest, one hand resting over his where it covered their unborn child. The baby had been conceived on their official mating night, 3 months after the Confederation's founding. A new generation that would grow up in a world where cooperation was the norm, where the ancient hatreds their parents had inherited would be nothing more than history lessons. Any word from the Southern Territories? She asked. Jackson's making progress with the coastal packs. Slow, but steady. Caden's voice held none of the old jealousy when he mentioned Jackson. The three of them had found their equilibrium, their roles clearly defined and mutually supportive. He should be back next week. Good. I miss having him around. So do I, Caden admitted. Strange how that worked out. Riley was about to respond when something caught her eye. A figure standing at the edge of the forest, barely visible in the gathering dusk. Tall, female, watching the headquarters with an intensity that made Riley's newly enhanced senses prickle with warning. Caden, she said quietly. Look at the tree line. Southeast of the main gate. Caden's eyes followed her gaze, and his body tensed. I see her. Human, but... He paused, concentrating. There's something else there. Something that doesn't belong. The figure seemed to realize she'd been spotted. She raised one hand in what might have been a salute or a challenge, then melted back into the forest with inhuman speed. Should we send a patrol? Caden asked. Riley considered it, then shook her head. Not yet. But increase security around the perimeter. And ask Ethan to review Madeline's personal effects again. Something tells me my aunt had more contingency plans than we realized. As they watched, a raven took flight from the spot where the figure had vanished, its cry echoing across the valley like a warning. Riley pressed her hand to her belly, feeling their child respond to her tension with restless movement. Whatever Madeline had planned as her final revenge, whatever threat was watching them from the shadows, Riley would be ready. She was no longer just a rejected wolf or even a powerful alpha. She was the Silver Moon reborn, guardian of the new age, protector of all supernatural peoples. And this time, she wouldn't be facing the darkness alone. The Confederation she'd built, the love she'd found, the family she was creating, all of it would stand against whatever came next. But first, she thought as Caden's arms tightened protectively around her, they would enjoy this moment of peace. This perfect evening when the future seemed bright and the past had finally been laid to rest. Even if that peace might not last as long as they hoped. In the forest, the raven circled once more before disappearing into the night, carrying with it the promise that Riley's story was far from over. The silver moon had risen. But every dawn brought new shadows, and some secrets ran deeper than even divine power could illuminate. For now, though, love was enough. Family was enough. Hope was enough. And sometimes, that was all anyone needed to face whatever came next. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe for more exciting stories. If you love to, drop where you are watching from in the comment below. I'd know the country you are watching from. Thank you.